Chapter 919. Messengers? Why are you here? Little Qingchen wanted to get down from the chair, but the legs of the chair were too high. He could only turn his back and try his best to get down from the chair with the tip of his little foot. That little appearance was extremely adorable. Bailey Shangxia had always been a good older brother. Seeing that his younger brother could not get down, of course he would help. He raised his arms and swayed as he hugged Qingchen, who was only slightly shorter than him. He glanced sideways at the two messengers who did not dare to move. His voice was very cool. I brought them here for you to play with. They are very obedient and did not run around. The messengers' thoughts were very complicated at this moment. They had been looking for an opportunity to escape, but they really did not dare to move, because the other party was too tight on the rope. However, seeing that this child looked like a little prince and had black eyes, he probably would not like to play with messengers. What kind of joke was this? Other than the little devil, which child would treat them as toys, and even give them to others as? Are there only two messengers? Two is too boring to play with. Wait a minute, is quantity the key? Two is not enough. Then how many do you want to catch to play with you? Before the messengers could finish their inner thoughts, Qingchen walked over with small steps. She bent down and poked their heads. She gave a serious evaluation. They are not very good looking. The messengers. This was completely different from what they had expected. Okay. Why did this seemingly gentle child have such a heavy taste? Also, could it be that they were not good looking enough? Every time humans saw them, they would be moved to tears. These two are indeed a little ugly. Next time, I will catch them. Bailey Shangxia's small face had always been very cool. He stretched out his hands and grabbed the two messengers. He was very strong. As long as he moved, the rope would tighten. This time, the messengers were completely obedient. Originally, they were hoping that when they saw a human child, they would let them go. Now Qingchen was dragging a reaper with each hand. The strength in her small hands was no less than that of Bailey Shangxia. Bailey Shangxia obviously did not care how Qingchen played, but he had to help the little one roll up her sleeves. After everything was arranged properly, he lowered his little face and said, "Let's go find Imperial Mother." Can we go out now? Qingchen knew how to deal with the aftermath. Bailey Shangxia had always been domineering. Sure, there were very few people outside, only two. I knocked them out. Qingchen originally wanted to raise a little demon, but she didn't expect that the little demon would turn out to be her big brother. However, her big brother was very good at doing things. As long as she followed her big brother, she would never have to worry about anything. The two little people, the big one holding the small one, the other two small hands dragging a ghost servant. Wherever they went, hundreds of ghosts would make way. No one dared to approach them, except for young Master Tang, who was walking towards them. He was still wearing his military uniform. Looking at the two unconscious police officers at his feet, he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He looked at the two little people in front of him with a smile. His gaze fell on Bailey Shangxia's scarlet eyes, and he raised his eyebrows. The first to react was Bailey Shangxia. Instead, it was the two ghost servants hiding behind them. They looked at young Master Tang in disbelief. Was this really a human? Why was the smell of blood on his body so strong? But he was indeed immortal. After killing so many people, he could still maintain his righteous aura, and was impervious to evil. This kind of person was usually more terrifying than demons. Had humans become so terrifying? Sensing the trembling of the reapers, Bailey Shangxia raised his head and glanced at young Master Tang. His gaze was deep and serene. Then, as if he did not see young Master Tang, he continued to hold Qingchen's hand and walked forward. Young Master Tang smiled playfully. Then, he flicked the cigarette in his hand and followed behind the two little people. When the door of the interrogation room was opened, Hellion Vivian saw this scene. Apart from her two precious sons, there was also a bright young Master Tang. Hellion Vivian was not surprised that young Master Tang would appear. After all, in a sense, Hellion Vivian was the one who told young Master Tang to deal with the aftermath. This was one of the procedures that had to be done after every mission. However, Hellion Vivian did not expect that young Master Tang would come with the two little ones. What was going on? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows at young Master Tang. Young Master Tang held a cigarette between his fingers and said with a smile that was not a smile, "I only heard that you have one son. What's the matter with the other one?" Hellion Vivian was very calm. She reached out and hugged Bailey Shangxia and Hellion Qingchen. "They're both mine." Red eyes, white skin. Young Master Tang put out the cigarette in his hand and casually found a chair to sit down. He crossed his legs and asked, "Vampire?" Bailey Shangxia replied coolly, "It's the devil." Young Master Tang nodded and said with a smile, Wei Wei, so the man you slept with is a demon. Why did he fly a plane to find you with such fanfare? Is he dissatisfied with your skills?" Hellion Vivian. She suddenly felt that the words of those rough men were much calmer compared to young Master Tang. Everyone was very cute. Bailey Shangxia turned to look at Qingchen. There was understanding in his eyes. It turned out that they all described their father as a man who was slept with by their mother. Qingchen held her forehead with her small hand as if she had a headache. She turned her face and whispered in Bailey Shangxia's ear. Beauty Weiwei has always been positioning herself as a domineering president. Do you know what a domineering president is? Bailey Shangxia nodded. He was also a child who had watched brainless dramas. When he thought of his father, he knew why his mother had such an illusion. In short, it was because his father was too shameless. However, Bailey Shangxia sized up young Master Tang. Who was this person? He seemed to be very familiar with his mother. If his father knew that his mother was very familiar with someone, the result wouldn't be good. But according to his father's personality, he would never do anything that would make his mother hate him. Moreover, this human looked different from normal humans. He seemed very smart, and shouldn't be easy to deal with, of course. Young Master Tang noticed that Bailey Shangxia was sizing him up. But what really made him look up was Beligaju, who was walking behind Bailey Shangxia. Two equally outstanding men, but they were of different types. With just a glance, Beligaju roughly knew who this person was. He used to care a lot about this man. Even now, he still felt that this man was very annoying. However, a certain prince was two-faced. He didn't show any emotions. He didn't even look at young Master Tang when they brushed past each other. Instead, he directly hugged Hellion Vivian's waist and kissed her forehead. He smiled and said, "The matter is settled. Let's go." Chapter 920. He used to care a lot about this man. And even now, he still felt that this man was an eyesore. However, His Highness was two-faced, and he didn't show any emotions. He didn't even look at young Master Tang when they brushed past each other. Instead, he put his arm around Hellion Vivian's waist and kissed her forehead. He smiled and said, "It's done. Let's go." Hellion Vivian felt that His Highness was too gentle. Was it because they hadn't seen each other for a long time? Hellion Weiwei nodded her head with a belly full of doubts, but she was actually obedient. After all, young Master Tang was here, which meant that the follow-up work was done. She believed that the information she collected was enough to bring some people to the surface, and young Master Tang was best at grabbing onto a thread and dragging everyone out. No one could guarantee that the human traffickers would disappear in the future, but at least after today's cleanup, they wouldn't be so unscrupulous anymore. Hellion Vivian was thinking about business, so she couldn't help but look at young Master Tang for a long time. Beligaju watched from the side and narrowed his eyes. He tightened his grip on Hellion Vivian's waist, but the corners of his mouth were still curled up. "You don't want to go?" Hellion Vivian didn't feel any pain, but she felt the strength. She looked up at His Highness, but didn't say anything. Then she heard Beligaju's low voice. "I think this must be young Master Tang. Thank you for taking care of Hellion Vivian for the past few years. However, I heard that the Tang sect has a rule that anyone who leaves the Tang sect won't be asked to do any more missions." His tone was very polite, with a sense of alienation and indifference, but it was also very domineering. Young Master Tang watched from the side with a playful look in his eyes. "This time, I want to ask Hellion Vivian for help. You shouldn't mind." Before Hellion Vivian could say that she didn't mind, Qingchen tugged at her sleeve. "What?" Qingchen blinked her eyes and signaled for her to look at Beligaju's expression. In fact, nothing could be seen from His Highness' expression, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. This was the expression that Hellion Vivian was most familiar with. Although she didn't know why, Hellion Vivian could tell that His Highness wasn't in a good mood. Young Master Tang didn't mean to make things difficult for Hellion Vivian. He just wanted to see how much she cared about his comrades. That's right, they were comrades. Although it was a superior-subordinate relationship, it was closer than that. They had gone through life and death together, so their feelings were naturally different. Therefore, young Master Tang took a step back, still holding the cigarette in his hand. It seems that you mind, Hellion Vivian. Since someone has come to ask you to take responsibility, this mission will be the last one. The matter in Yunggui district is not over yet, and there is still one person who hasn't shown up. With this gentleman's help, you should be able to solve the problem soon. After this, neither the Tang sect nor I will ask you to take on any more missions. Of course, if someone treats you badly, the Tang sect will also be a very competent family. This sentence was more or less a declaration of his position. This was also the reason why no matter how far the Tang sect's shadow had gone, as long as the Tang sect gave the order, they would come back. The devilish training would indeed make people very difficult to get close to. However, along the way, they had unknowingly changed from people who were very similar to each other to family. Hellion Vivian understood what young Master Tang meant, and so did Beligaju. His tone was very calm, but there was an innate sense of oppression. No one will treat her badly. Young Master Tang believed this, but he didn't know whether to say that it was Hellion Vivian's fortune or misfortune to have met such a man, because no matter how he looked at it, he knew more about Hellion Vivian. The more he knew, the more he calculated, the more important it was. It was just like how he treated someone. Young Master Tang understood this feeling very well. He and Beligaju treated their lovers the same way. Therefore, as early as when Beligaju leaned over and kissed Hellion Vivian, he knew that this man not only had a background, but also his thoughts were very complicated. Young Master Tang never liked to be enemies with such a person, and of course, he wouldn't become friends with him. This was because he reckoned that young Master Tang didn't like him. However, this person was terrifying, because he didn't show any hostility to him from the beginning to the end. No wonder Hellion Vivian fell for him. Young Master Tang curled his lower lip, and did not dwell on this issue. Instead, he looked at Hellion Vivian, and went straight to the point. There is another person in Yunggui district who is the target of this mission, but this person is very smart. He didn't participate in the human trafficking, nor did he give sixth brother any convenience. However, every step that Lu Hongjiang took was guided by him. This person is now in the inner city, and will be transferred back to the capital soon. Don't let such a person go back, as there are other factors to consider after he goes back. Just get rid of him while he is still in Li City. What we lack most now is evidence, and this evidence will be handed over to you for investigation. Monkey and the rest are waiting outside the door. Firstly, they want to meet you, and secondly, they are very interested in the man you slept with. Since you entered the Tang sect, it seems that you haven't had a holiday. You can take advantage of this time to go on a honeymoon with public funds. All the expenses will be paid by the Tang sect. Okay. Hellion Vivian had always been very interested in public funds. What's more, since they were already here, it would be fun to go to Li City on the way. She could also connect with her two sons. Unexpectedly, His Highness did not object, because he knew very well that the more he disagreed, the more it would cause a certain woman to retaliate. Some things had to be done step by step. Perhaps he could cooperate with the people of the Tang sect, as long as the content of the cooperation was that young Master Tang could not appear in front of Hellion Vivian in the future. Of course, these were all afterthoughts. His Highness would never just declare sovereignty from one side. More often than not, he would use the most direct aesthetics of violence. For example, the following content. Since we are done with the business, I have some private matters to discuss with Hellion Vivian. Please take the two brats with you when you leave, and then close the door. When Beligaju said this sentence, the two little ones looked at each other silently, and then, the enchantment set up by His Highness appeared in front of them. In just a moment, only Hellion Vivian and Beligaju were left in the interrogation room. Chapter 921. At this time, Hellion Vivian realized that something was wrong. Even if he wanted to talk, he didn't need to set up a barrier. Just as she was about to raise her head, someone suddenly picked her up by the waist. As the world spun, she was pressed down on the table. Hellion Vivian's blood froze in an instant because the sandalwood smell on the man was too strong. So strong that it was hard to forget. Bailey Jiaju wrapped his arm around her waist in a familiar manner. He only used force to pull, then pushed again. His arms supported himself on the wooden table, trapping her entire body between his chest and the wooden table. He sneered word by word. Just like that, a man's breath slowly slipped past her ears. He was very close to her, so close that she had no choice but to continuously retreat in order to avoid the invasive aura on his body. Hellion Weiwei was forced to raise her head. A pair of incomparably sharp black eyes just happened to meet hers. Those black eyes were exactly the same as in her memory, shining with light. Even in the darkness, they could still accurately find the prey, as firm and awe-inspiring as that night. You seem to be very obedient to your benefactor? Bailey Jiaju smiled. His gentle voice revealed a magnetic charm that could captivate one's heart and soul. His eyebrows and eyes were full of unbridled elegance. His expression was elegant to the peak. His smile and frown were like a brilliant neon in full bloom. This is not a good sign, because it will only make me want to lock you up. So you better be obedient, okay? Hellion Vivian felt her claws being grabbed by someone. After so many years, she had the illusion that she was being kept in captivity again. Then, before she could react, Beligaju had already lifted her whole body, and even her chin was pinched by him. She had no choice but to open her mouth and let his tongue sweep through her mouth. Hellion Vivian only felt that her tongue was going to be numb from his sucking, but he still refused to let her go. He held her waist and wantonly lit fire on her clothes. She instinctively trembled, and when she thought that someone could break in at any time, she could no longer calm down. But he nibbled on her ear and kept rubbing it. "Is it comfortable?" He smiled wickedly as he slid his hand down to her neck. His fingers gently stroked back and forth as he held her back with one hand. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "Too bad this isn't a good place to do things." Hellion Vivian's legs were extremely weak. If it wasn't for him supporting her, she suspected that she would have collapsed to the ground like a puddle of water. She might as well just lie in his arms. He was happy to see her like this. He pulled her into his arms, wrapped her up horizontally, and strode out of the interrogation room. Outside the barrier, other than the two little ones, there was also a group of rough men. They had been waiting to see what the man their boss had slept with looked like. But when they looked up, they saw Hellion Vivian being carried out by a handsome man. Their jaws almost dropped to the ground. This is the man that boss slept with? He doesn't look easy to deal with. Is he here to snatch little boss? I think he is more interested in boss than little boss. Several rough men stood in a row outside the Yunqing police station and whispered together. Behind them were 5 limited edition sports cars. Originally, this scene was very cool. Unfortunately, as soon as Beligaju appeared, he took away all their limelight. Ulde could even hear the gasps of the girls who walked past him. This man was too dangerous. It was said that one should not marry a man who was too good-looking. He had always known that boss liked to judge people by their appearance, but he never thought that boss would judge people by their appearance to this extent. Of course, Beligaju also saw them. He glanced at them. He was smiling, but it gave people a strong sense of coldness. This made the rough men realize how dangerous the other party was, and they very sensibly made way for him. In any case, the other party wasn't here to steal their little boss, and had even brought them a little young master, so it didn't matter if the boss was given to him. Hellion Vivian knew what they were thinking when she saw their expressions. She was speechless. Beligaju seemed to be very satisfied with this situation. He stopped and chatted with the rough men for a while. Jean felt that this person was not bad. Except for the sense of coercion on his body. He was completely tall, rich, and handsome. It was not a loss for boss to marry such a man. The two little ones only looked up at the side. Bailey Shangxia's extremely cool little face snorted coldly. "How cunning. From the moment you came out until now, you've been hugging Imperial Mother. Is this a declaration of sovereignty?" Qingchen had long felt that her father, whom she had never seen before, would eat Beauty Vivian up as soon as he appeared, so she was not surprised. She just stretched out her small sleeves and held the rope in her hand tightly. One must know that the other end of the rope was tied to the Reapers of Ghosts. Beligaju naturally heard his son's cold snort. He turned his head and looked at Bailey Shangxia with a meaningful gaze. Bailey Shangxia suddenly remembered what he said to Hellion Vivian before his father appeared. He narrowed his eyes, turned around, and was about to run away from home with his younger brother. Of course, this idea did not succeed, because Bailey Jiaju quickly stuffed him into the plane. When he lowered his head, the smile on his face disappeared, leaving only the cunning that only demons would have between each other. This is the first time you met your mother. You didn't want your mother to dislike you, right? Then you should be more friendly. When we arrive at Lee City, you can play with your younger brother. Don't disturb me and your mother. Bailey Shangxia had always felt that his father was shameless. However, the private secrets between father and son would not be revealed. Moreover, his younger brother should be taken care of by him. Bailey Shangxia was a very competent elder brother. He sat beside Qingchen and did not forget to fasten the little one's seatbelt. Hellion Vivian saw this scene, and her heart was very complicated. In the beginning, she had tried to go back, but not everyone could tear apart time and space. When she looked at Qingchen, she would always think about how her other son was now. Would he be bullied by other children because he did not have a mother? However, after thinking about it carefully, her Debeo should not be bullied. Demons were different from humans. They were reckless and arrogant. As long as they were in the human world, they would be regarded as an alien. Therefore, when Qingchen said in the beginning that she wanted to raise a little demon, Hellion Vivian had a ripple in her heart. She even went against her principle of not meddling in other people's business and wanted to snatch Shangxia and raise him. When she looked at Shangxia's face, she would think of her son, who was supposed to be 1,000 years ago. She never dared to ask for too much. She could only fantasize in her heart and try her best to make up for it. Fortunately, they were all here. Hellion Vivian could not help but lower her eyes and kiss her eldest son's little head. Chapter 922. Bailey Shangxia did not expect that Hellion Vivian would do such a thing. His little body, which was originally fastening his younger brother's seatbelt, was shocked. His cool little face showed a rare awkwardness. After all, he was a man and had never been kissed like this. He moved along, and when he turned his head, he could not help but smile. It was obvious that he liked it when Hellion Vivian kissed him. The family of 4 sat like this. The 2 little ones were in the innermost seat, while Beligaju was in the outermost seat. Compared to a civilian plane, a private plane was more spacious. Even the chairs were much softer. In addition, the cabin was spacious enough. In addition to food, Beligaju's favorite red wine was also prepared. Most importantly, there would not be any stewardesses here who would talk to Beligaju. No matter if it was the person flying the plane or the figure standing quietly at the side, they were not human. Apart from the green dragon and the fire Kirin, the handsome men in black suits on the plane all had a pair of blood-red eyes. Every time they addressed Bailey Shangxia as Little Master. This was simply Bailey Shangxia's world. He took out all the good things for his younger brother to play with. His every move was enough to show that he had good genes. It did not take much time to fly from Yun City to Lee City, so the 2 little ones did not sleep. On the contrary, Hellion Vivian leaned on Beligaju's shoulder and slept a little soundly. Bailey Shangxia completely took on the responsibility of taking care of Qingchen. He was worried that Qingchen would have tinnitus when the plane landed, so he reached out his little hand and kept rubbing the little one's ears. Qingchen was also holding an ice cream in her hand. She passed a bite to Bailey Shangxia and took another bite herself. The 2 brothers did not need to worry about getting along with each other. It was obvious that Bailey Shangxia was very good at taking care of his little brother. Whenever he saw Qingchen's little sleeve fall, he would roll it up for him. However, the 2 ghost servants suffered. They had never taken a plane before when they were alive. After they died, they would float around on the ground. Now that they could see the white clouds when they lowered their heads, the feeling was quite uncomfortable. Beligaju sensed their little movements and turned to look at the 2 messengers. The latter instantly tensed up. One had to know that a big demon was much more terrifying than a small demon. The two of them were not on the same level at all. Baligaju didn't say anything. He just smiled evilly and placed his slender index finger on his lips. His meaning was obvious. He wanted them to not make a single sound. Otherwise, he would let them taste the taste of death again. The two messengers immediately stopped talking. They wanted to cry but had no tears. What kind of family was this? Baligaju never thought that this was a big deal. He had someone bring a blanket and covered Hellion Vivian's body. He held Hellion Vivian in one hand and took the information handed to him by his subordinate in the other. He had never been interested in traveling. It was inconvenient to do anything outside. He preferred to lock someone in the castle and let him do whatever he wanted. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. Baligaju turned his face and kissed Hellion Vivian's hair. Hellion Vivian was still in a daze. Her cheek rubbed against his shoulder. She didn't open her eyes and spoke in a sleepy voice. "Have we arrived?" "Not yet. I'll tell you when we arrive." A certain highness voice was very deep. It always had a kind of magic that could help people fall asleep. "Keep sleeping." The familiar scent of peppermint sandalwood continuously wafted into Hellion Weiwei's nose. This made Hellion Weiwei's consciousness fall deeper and deeper. That magnetic voice also made people feel incomparably at ease. Baligaju saw that she had fallen asleep again. His lips curved into a smile. That kind of smile was so gentle that it didn't seem like him. Fire Qilin watched from the side. Incomparable joy surged in his heart, because he couldn't imagine what his master would be like if he couldn't find the princess consort. A while ago, he was so cold that he didn't have any emotions. Only the princess consort could make his master look like a human with flesh and blood. Bailey Shangxia was also aware of the change in his imperial father, but he had nothing to say. On the other hand, little Qingchen, who was chewing on his ice cream, looked at Bailey Jiaju and asked, "So you're not a scumbag?" In response to the question raised by his youngest son, Baligaju raised his eyebrows. "Of course not." Then he looked at Bailey Shangxia. His finger tapped the information in his hand. "Shangxia, I've told you before. You can do bad things but don't get caught by me. This principle is also applicable in school. Don't let me receive reports saying that you have a tendency to be violent, understand?" Bailey Shangxia didn't care. His voice was very cool. "After we go back, I'll get rid of the person who said that his younger brother is a country bumpkin. How dare he snitch? What a stupid human. It seems that I didn't hit him too hard back then." Country bumpkin? Baligaju had never interfered with his eldest son's behavior of taking in underlings in school. But this time, it seemed that there was something else. This made Baligaju want to get rid of the matter in Dali as soon as possible, and then fly back to the imperial capital to find out what happened that day. At this time, the noblewoman sitting in the kindergarten refused to compromise. She insisted that the school give an explanation. Her son couldn't be beaten up just like that, especially when Hellion Vivian's son was involved. If the other party was rich, she could still tolerate it. Why was Hellion Vivian ahead above all of them when they were in school? Now she was just a lousy car mechanic. Not only was she taking care of her own child, but she was also extremely poor. Even so, her son still wanted to bully her baby. Just wait. She'll definitely have a complete plan to make Hellion Weiwei, this woman, lose all face in front of all her classmates. After the noblewoman gave the school a final warning, she held little Fatty Cheng's hand and went home. She could almost imagine how Hellion Vivian would put down her pride and beg her after this weekend. Time passed by little. The sky in Dali City darkened later than in other cities, and the sunshine was much longer. The sun shone on one's body and it was warm, but the wind was a little strong. After getting off the private jet, Baligaju directly put the scarf that was prepared by his men on Hellion Vivian's shoulder. The two older ones walked in front, while the two younger ones followed behind. Bailey Shangxia pulled his small suitcase in one hand and held Qingchen's hand, who was only a head shorter than him, in the other. They walked in front in a very cool manner, attracting many people's attention. Chapter 923. Qingchen was still holding the rope in her little hand, wobbling behind Bailey Shangxia, wearing a small leather hat on her head, looking at the crowd walking around with her big eyes. In order not to alert the enemy, Hellion Vivian did not let His Highness mobilize his people. The family of four, whether in terms of dress or itinerary, looked like tourists who came to Lee City. Baligaju has always hated places with strong sunlight, so did Bailey Shangxia. One old and one young, each wearing a pair of pure black sunglasses, covering most of their face. But even so, when Baligaju appeared in the airport hall, it still caused an uproar. Whether it was in ancient times or modern times, he was like a natural light. Even in the crowd, his slender and tall figure could catch everyone's eyes at the first moment. Short silver hair, pure black sunglasses, a side face so white that women can't compare, and a handsome angular face, almost made the people who came to the airport to take the plane almost wonder if a superstar has come. However, even a superstar may not have the aura of this person. Only when he wore the latest trench coat, it seemed to show the essence of the noble and ascetic. His legs were very slender, and he was tall. From this angle, only his tall nose and perfect thin lips could be seen. Bailey Shangxia was by his side. The father and son were very cool, a bit like a vampire aristocrat who came out of the TV. If you think that His Highness will carry the luggage, you are wrong. Throughout the whole journey, looking from afar, you can see an extremely handsome man walking slowly forward, followed by Hellion Vivian with long legs and long hair, pulling a large suitcase. Even Bailey Shangxia couldn't stand it. He always knew that his father was very shameless, but he didn't expect him to be shameless to this extent, even letting his mother carry the luggage. Baligaju didn't care what his son thought. For him, ordering Hellion Vivian around was also a kind of pleasure, because it was convenient for him to do other things. For example, when she was carrying her luggage, he could feed her a mouthful of water. It was just like raising the little phoenix back then. As Bailey Jiaju thought about it, in a place where Hellion Weiwei couldn't see, the corners of his mouth slowly curved up a little. His slender fingers twisted open the bottle cap, and his movements were natural as he handed it over to Hellion Weiwei. Hellion Vivian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with what she was doing. She pulled the suitcase happily. When she was thirsty, Baligaju would stop and let her drink some water. His Highness obviously didn't like this place, and so did Bailey Shangxia. As soon as they stepped out of the airport, and the sun shone on them, they both frowned at the same time. Their expressions were practically synchronized. Hellion Vivian found it funny. She reached out and held His Highness's hand. "Isn't it too hot?" "Yes." Baligaju's voice was a little muffled. It was still low and cold, but it was different from when he was in front of others. "There are many people, and the sun is also very hot." Bailey Shangxia looked at his father disapprovingly. As a demon with a divine sense, how could he be afraid of the sun? He could obviously put up a defense by himself, but he just had to show weakness in front of his mother. He finally knew why his mother defined him as a domineering president. It was because a certain someone's shamelessness had far exceeded his imagination. He was simply unscrupulous. In some aspects, the father and son were very much in sync. After noticing Bailey Shangxia's gaze, Baligaju slowly glanced over. That gaze was filled with a meaning that only the father and son could understand. Bailey Shangxia wasn't interested in exposing his father's trick, so he turned his head and continued to roll up Qingqin's sleeves. Hellion Vivian also felt that the sun was too hot, so she simply used a scarf to prop up the shadow. Qingqin was even more thorough. Her small body moved forward and blocked Bailey Shangxia's entire body. Her other hand held the iced milk that she bought and handed it to Bailey Shangxia to drink. The big suitcase was just enough for Qingqin to sit on. Baligaju thought for a moment, then picked up Qingqin with one hand and threw her on top. Then he signaled Bailey Shangxia to push it. He had never seen such a relaxed father. Fortunately, Bailey Shangxia was very reliable. As the most frightening little master in the demon world, pushing a suitcase was a piece of cake. In order to prevent Qingqin from falling, Bailey Shangxia considerately used his other small arm to cross in front of the suitcase. That cool little face was full of seriousness. Hellion Vivian was left with only a small suitcase in her hand. She had no problem carrying it with one hand. Since they were disguised as tourists, They couldn't ride the BMW Tomahawk or drive a sports car. S and the others all stayed in place and waited for orders. They would only appear when needed. The accommodation was also booked in advance. It wasn't a big hotel, but a local hostel. Everything was to better understand Lee City. Before Hellion Vivian came, young Master Tang gave her a document. The document showed that there was once a university student who wanted to report something on the internet. But before she could explain the matter clearly, the university student disappeared. Hellion Vivian could only start an investigation based on the university student's last appearance. An international hostel with a good reputation. Hellion Vivian believed that there would be no problem with this hostel. But at least they could know the range of activities of the missing university student there. There were many taxis outside the airport. Hellion Vivian reached out and stopped one. She took the two little ones to sit in the back seat. Baligaju sat in the front with his long legs, exuding a noble aura. When the taxi driver saw them, his eyes suddenly lit up. While driving, he talked about the local customs of Lee City. He turned his face and asked, "It's your first time in Lee City, right? Have you found a good place to stay?" Baligaju didn't speak. He only turned his head and glanced at him. With just a glance, the taxi driver immediately stopped talking. He didn't know what he felt at that moment. It was as if his whole soul was about to be taken away. Fortunately, he came back to his senses in time. His palms were still sweaty, and there was an unknown fear in his heart. Did he see wrongly? How could this person's eyes be red? Now that the noise was gone, Bailey Jiaju turned his head and looked out of the window through his sunglasses. However, his hand was placed on the car window. His silver hair was blown away by the wind, revealing his bright and clean forehead. He was born with an air of nobility. No matter what kind of vehicle he was on, his casual movement was like taking a picture of a poster. Chapter 924. The taxi driver calmed down with lingering fear. Seeing this, Hellion Vivian chuckled and said, "I've booked a place to stay, but I don't know how to arrange the itinerary." Hearing this, the taxi driver immediately said, "I know a good travel agency here. You're going out as a family of 4, so don't play by yourself. It's very convenient to sign up for a group trip. One person costs 150 yuan a day, and you can visit 2 scenic spots." "Oh, that's not bad." Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed, and there was still a smile on her lips. "Which travel agency? Let's go and have a look when we're free." The taxi driver was very enthusiastic. "It's right in front. I'll take you there in a while, but your inn is not very good. Why did you book the North Gate? The South Gate is the busiest. Do you need me to recommend an inn for you? It costs 80 yuan a day, much cheaper than the one you booked." "That won't be necessary. We've booked a special family room. Children will like it." Hellion Weiwei sounded like she was just chatting. However, Qingchen knew that with Beauty Vivian's personality, she would never chat with anyone. The taxi driver didn't insist. With a smile on his face, he gave a very warm and good impression. "The travel agency is in front. You can take a look at the itinerary. If you're satisfied, I'll pick you up tomorrow." "You'll pick me up? The driver is also responsible for picking up tourists?" Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. The taxi driver smiled and said, "We're all from the same company, so we can pick up tourists for free. Don't worry, everything is very formal. If you don't want me to pick you up, you can go to the designated place and take a taxi yourself. It's not convenient for your family of 4 to live in the North Gate." Hellion Vivian smiled and didn't say anything more. After getting off the taxi, they saw a local travel agency. The decoration was very formal, and it specialized in picking up individual tourists. Many people were buying tickets, and the price was very affordable. Hellion Vivian hadn't stopped thinking since she walked into this travel agency, because in the information given to her by young Master Tang, it seemed to vaguely mention that the missing female college student had also signed up for this travel agency. She had been missing for a long time, and in this situation, she must be dead. But why did she go missing? Where did she go missing? It was all a mystery. There was an explanation from Lee City. Nowadays, there were too many university students who came out to travel on a budget. It was common for them to go missing by accident. There were also those who ran into danger while trying to escape the fair and took the small path up the mountain, never to come down again. Yes, that was correct. Indeed, such a situation would occur. However, the more this was the case, the more Helene Vivian felt strange. This was because this missing college student was not a poor traveler. Although she had booked a youth tour, it was a special room, and the price was not cheap. Moreover, she had flown all the way here, and even signed up for a tour group. No matter how she thought about it, there should not be an accident. The family of the female university student thought so too, so they had been asking for an answer from Lee City. The answer was given, but it was even more infuriating than the first one. In general, it was about a girl who was overjoyed when she arrived at Lee City. She wanted to have a beautiful relationship, but was accidentally sold by someone, and so on and so forth. The continent had always been like this. Many people had never truly respected women. A girl had been raped. They would say that this kind of thing was simply a matter of one's willingness to be beaten, and one's willingness to be beaten. A girl dressed up so beautifully in the middle of the night. Wasn't she looking for trouble? Fuck your willingness to be beaten, and one's willingness to be beaten. A girl dressed up to make herself happy. Why should she be raped just because she was pretty? When Helene Vivian saw this excuse, her fingers clenched the information in her palm. It was because of this that she wanted to investigate this case thoroughly. She could understand the feelings of a family member. No mother would want her daughter to be talked about like this. The missing victim was obviously her own daughter, but she had to be slandered like this. Even the reason given was so chilling. Helene Vivian lost her mother when she was young, so when she saw the information about a mother who ran from the capital to Lee City for her daughter, back and forth trying to get an answer, Helene Vivian made up her mind at that time. She must give the other party a perfect answer, even if the answer would hurt her more. However, Helene Vivian knew that sometimes a mother just wanted to know what happened to her daughter. Helene Vivian thought of this and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was already shrewd. Before she walked to the counter of the travel agency, she was warmly stopped by a tour guide and asked if she needed any help. Since she was a tourist, of course, she had to ask about the scenic spots. Fortunately, Helene Vivian was very concise. She asked a few questions in less than a few minutes. The tour guide was very patient when she answered. After Helene Vivian understood, she said, "Then I'll think about it. If I want to play tomorrow, I'll contact you." Okay. This is my business card. Please keep it well." The tour guide gave the business card to Helene Vivian. When she went out, she even greeted the taxi driver. It was obvious that the two of them knew each other. The taxi driver looked at Helene Vivian from the rearview mirror and said, "What did I say? We are all from the same company. We are very formal. Don't worry." Helene Vivian was the only one who got out of the car to ask. The two little ones and a certain highness were sitting in the car. They didn't even listen to the driver's words. When they arrived at the place where they lived, Bailey Shangxia smiled at the driver. That smile was full of evil, as if the other party had already become the food on his table. Baligaju knew that at this time, his eldest son was hungry. He reached out and picked the little one up. His voice was a little cold. "You want to eat everything? Where are your dining etiquette?" The driver thought that the child had seen the bread in his car. He shook his head and smiled. Very disapprovingly, he continued to turn his head to Helene Vivian and told her to contact him when she made a decision. He could pick them up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Helene Vivian replied, "Okay." Only then did the driver start the car. Qingchen watched from the side and shook her little head like a little adult. She thought to herself, "If you don't leave now, you will be left with a corpse." What an ignorant driver. He actually dared to ask the family of 4 to sign up for a group tour. He could imagine what kind of scene would be tomorrow. He had to prepare more chocolate, so that he could sit by the side and eat chocolate while watching the show. On the other side, Bailey Shangxia was not angry that there was no food. He turned around coolly and held Qingchen's hand. In his heart, taking care of his little brother was more important than eating. Chapter 925. Helene Weiwei finished checking in and conveniently took her luggage upstairs. As a result, His Highness was once again looked down upon by others. Under everyone's piercing gazes, a certain highness walked up the stairs with a clear conscience. In fact, the luggage was nothing to Hellion Vivian. If it was really heavy, Beligaju wouldn't have asked her to carry it. Since Hellion Vivian performed very well, His Highness was prepared to give her a very beautiful surprise tonight. Hellion Vivian didn't know what His Highness was thinking. If she knew, her mood would definitely be indescribable. Because what His Highness described as a pleasant surprise, to Hellion Weiwei, was usually a shock. Hellion Vivian didn't need to worry about the two little ones. The family room was on the second floor. It was a beautiful small attic. The room was very large and had an ancient style. It leaned against the mountain, and one could overlook the ancient city when they opened the window. The small leather suitcase in Bailey Shangxia's hand had been taken up by Hellion Vivian. He was only responsible for holding Qingqin's hand, who was still a little shaky when she walked. As a good brother, Bailey Shangxia was very attentive to Qingqin. He was afraid that Qingqin would fall, so he almost followed by Qingqin's side. His short legs moved forward like a little gentleman. He turned around and held Qingqin's hand as they walked up the wooden stairs step by step. Compared to Bailey Shangxia, His Highness was really a stark contrast. In the family room, the children were prepared with wooden bunk beds. Bailey Shangxia was sleeping on the top bunk. In a flash, he sat on the top bunk and placed his little pillow properly. Then, he helped little Qingqin change his clothes, buttoned up his shirt, and prepared all these things before heading out for dinner. In the past, Qingqin always wore her own clothes. She couldn't fix her sleeves properly. Now, she sat on the bed obediently and stretched out her small arms for Bailey Shangxia to help her. Hellion Weiwei looked at her two sons. She could not help but hug both of their little heads and give each of them a kiss. Qingqin stretched out two small hands and pressed his head. "Beauty Vivian, my hair is going to be messed up by you. You can't just kiss a gentleman, do you understand?" I know, Hellion Vivian said perfunctorily and kissed that little head again very insincerely. Qingqin still liked how close Hellion Vivian was to him. She nestled in Bailey Shangxia's arms with a smile. Bailey Shangxia also found the feeling of the past. He vaguely remembered the past. At that time, he was still in his mother's belly, holding his younger brother and talking. His mother rubbed her belly like this, looking forward to their birth every day. Hellion Vivian naturally kissed Bailey Shangxia, and she kissed him twice at once. Beligaju watched from the side. He was originally sitting on a wooden chair on the observation deck, shaking a glass of red liquid in his hand. After seeing Hellion Vivian's actions, he raised his eyebrows. However, he reached out and put down the goblet. Then he strode over to Hellion Weiwei's side. His Highness thought that according to this situation, after kissing the two brats, she would kiss him. Unexpectedly, after Hellion Vivian kissed the two brats, she went straight to put away her luggage, completely ignoring the man who was already standing behind her. Beligaju's eyes darkened. He looked at the luggage, as if he wanted to throw it out of the window. The two brats could only sense their father's thoughts. They looked at Beligaju, who was standing in the same spot with narrowed eyes, and laughed. Their little faces were full of gloating. Their father must have never thought that he would be the one who would lose out in the end when he let their mother carry the luggage. Beligaju glanced over and curled his lips coldly. These two brats were not worth his attention. He only needed to care about one person. In the middle of the family room was a hall. Hellion Vivian had to put her luggage behind a wooden sliding door. Beligaju strode in with his long legs. He was very fast. With one hand on the wooden door behind him, he pulled Hellion Vivian's arm with the other. With a strong force of his wrist, she fell into his arms just like that. The tip of her nose was pressed against his chest. Under her palm, she could hear the continuous sound of his strong heartbeat. His breath still lingered between her lips. Hellion Vivian pressed down on his hand. "Hey, I'm still packing my luggage. That's why I came to help you." Beligaju hugged her without any intention of letting go. Did he need to kiss someone to help him pack his luggage? Hellion Weiwei tried to push him away with her hands. Who knew that he would reach out his hand and press down on her back forcefully? She fell back into his arms again, closer than before. He had no intention of letting go of her at all. The strength in his arms did not decrease in the slightest. Instead, his clear peach blossom eyes became darker and darker. It was as if there was a fire burning in them, making one's mouth dry up. In the next second, that handsome face pressed down on her. The cold aura was more wanton than ever before. It was as if he finally couldn't bear it anymore, and exploded all his worries. Hellion Vivian only felt pain and numbness from his caressing. Even her legs felt weak. However, he had no intention of letting her go at all. With full patience, he kissed her gently as if he was coaxing her. The kiss gradually came to an end. Hellion Vivian's vision was already blurred. She let him put her down on the floor. Bang. The wooden door was kicked open by Bailey Shangxia coolly. With a sly smile on his face he said, "I'm hungry. Let's go downstairs to eat." Baligaju took a deep breath and turned his head. His eyes darkened slightly. He reached out and picked up Bailey Shangxia. With a mischievous smile he said, "It seems that our conversation just now was not deep enough." Bailey Shangxia looked at his father vigilantly. He wanted to slip away. "It's already very deep. I want to take my younger brother downstairs to eat." Baligaju picked up his son and exuded a demonic aura. "Before eating, it's best to exercise. Otherwise, how can you take good care of your younger brother?" "I can take good care of my younger brother without exercising." Bailey Shangxia instinctively felt that it was dangerous. Baligaju did not give him any chance to refuse. He directly pressed the little one down and said in a low voice, "After 100 frog jumps, we will go downstairs. Maybe you want to go back to the demon world more?" Bailey Shangxia did not want to go back to the demon world the most. As soon as Baligaju mentioned this matter, he immediately became obedient. When Hellion Vivian came over to ask, Bailey Shangxia did not complain. He was afraid that his vengeful father would throw him into the demon world. "Shangxia and I will exercise for a while first," Baligaju told Hellion Vivian. His tone was extremely evil. Chapter 926. Hellion Vivian more or less knew what was going on, but she didn't really care about it. After all, in her eyes, this was also a way for father and son to communicate their feelings. Although their family's way of communication was a little different from other people's. 1, 2, 3, 10. In the room, the little one held his head coolly, kicked his legs and jumped forward. Baligaju looked at him lazily, crossed his legs, and leaned against the door. "Little brat, who taught you that after 4 is 10? Bailey Shangxia, are you challenging my intelligence? I thought you would become kinder after you found mother." Bailey Shangxia snorted coldly, jumping and talking at the same time, looking cool and cute. Baligaju lowered his head and flipped through the information in his hand, not feeling the slightest bit because of his son's accusation. "Facts have proven that it was all your imagination. Also, don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. Compared to you interrupting my good deeds and constantly slandering me, this punishment is considered light. Continue to jump, there are still 80 more." Bailey Shangxia wailed, holding his little head and jumping up and down again. After 10 minutes, Baligaju put on his sunglasses, held Bailey Shangxia's hand, and went downstairs to eat. As for holding hands, Bailey Shangxia was against it. Baligaju looked at him indifferently. "Do you want your mother to know that we don't have a good relationship?" He only knew how to use his mother to pressure others. Bailey Shangxia disdained his father's shamelessness, but he didn't want to show anything bad in front of his mother and younger brother. It had to be said that in terms of acting, the father and son were extremely imaginative. The food in the inn was very delicious, and it was highly recommended on the internet. They even thoughtfully prepared barley tea. Hellion Vivian ordered a table full of dishes and put Qingchen on a soft chair. Qingchen's table manners had always been very good. She was holding her own small bowl and chopsticks, and there was a white napkin in front of her clothes. When she saw Bailey Shangxia coming, she took the initiative to prepare her brother's bowl and chopsticks. Bailey Shangxia had always been indifferent to human food. Other than chocolate and ice cream, he basically ate nothing. They were slightly better off than vampires. Demons could still eat, but vampires couldn't ingest anything other than fresh blood. They couldn't even see the sun. Bailey Shangxia also hated sunlight, and so did his father. If one wanted to pass through the space-time gap, they would have to pay a certain price. Especially when this space-time gap was torn open by his father, the loss would be greater. His father had never told anyone about this matter. Perhaps only he, who was also a demon, knew about it. As soon as he walked into the restaurant, Baligaju took off his sunglasses. The moment his face was exposed, both the diners and the staff in the restaurant couldn't help but look at him. Too handsome. He looks like someone who walked out of a comic. His hair is still silver. Is it dyed? I don't think so. He should be a mixed blood. Look at his child's eyes. They are red and bright like gems. Are all the children overseas so good-looking? You didn't see the child's mother. When I was serving the dishes just now, I took a look. Oh my God, she is so beautiful. She has no makeup on. She is super nice. When she was ordering, she kept smiling at me. She is very elegant. Also, she is with her little son. He is tying the napkin by himself, just like a little prince. This is a winner in life. Not only is her husband handsome, but her two sons are soft and cool. Oh my God. This woman must have saved the galaxy in her previous life. Hellion Vivian had always been good at self-restraint. When she heard the girls talking like this, she turned her head and smiled at them. That kind of smile seemed to obscure her gender, with a different kind of evil charm. The girls had a better impression of her. They were eager to take photos of this family of four. But when they pressed the button to take photos, their phones all crashed at the same time. It was as if all the power was suddenly taken away. It was very strange. All their attention was on their phones, so they didn't notice that when Bailey Jajua put down the wine glass in his hand, there was a flash of light in the bottom of his eyes. Bailey Shangxia didn't care who took photos of him. Anyway, his first thought after coming to modern times was that he wanted to be a superstar in the future. Since he wanted to be a star, of course, he had to get used to various kinds of cameras. However, he was very clear in his heart that with his own father's possessiveness, he would never allow his mother to be taken photos of casually. Hellion Vivian, as before, buried her head and ate. Her whole little face was bulging. When she saw delicious food, she would always put it on Baligaju's plate. Baligaju couldn't eat more than 2 mouthfuls. His arm was on the back of her chair. Most of the time, he was putting food on Vivian's plate. His posture was indescribably gentle. The 2 little ones ate very well, especially Qingchen, who was biting the small ribs in her mouth. She looked very cute. Bailey Shangxia's job from beginning to end was to roll up his little brother's sleeves. After dinner, Hellion Vivian took the adults and the 2 little ones into the ancient city for a walk. The ancient city of Li City was very beautiful, especially at night. There were all kinds of lights and feasts. There were all kinds of snacks, indescribable small shops with ethnic characteristics, and melodious songs in the Westerner street. Little Qingchen had eaten too much for dinner. He kept rubbing his little belly and swaying as he walked. Bailey Shangxia held her hand. From time to time, he lowered his head and said a few words to his little brother. The 2 little ones whispered in each other's ears. The general content of the conversation was that when they returned to the kindergarten, they must accept a lot of underlings. Little Qingchen concurred in agreement. Hellion Vivian listened in the front and was very confused. Why did she always feel that her sons were raised astray? The 2 little ones were very obedient. Qingchen encountered a large dog on the road. Suddenly, she stopped and ran towards Hellion Vivian. Beauty Hellion Vivian, Xiaohei hasn't been out recently. Hellion Vivian didn't say anything. Baligaju narrowed his eyes, then reached out and pinched his eldest son's ear. A black earring used to suppress the magic appeared on Bailey Shangxia's ear bone. Almost instantly, a demon dog with black fog all over its body appeared in front of Qingchen. Its hair was black and dense, like a mixed-blood Tibetan Mastiff. It immediately attracted the attention of the people on the street. The demon dog was very obedient to its little master. It followed the 2 little ones obediently throughout the whole process, never leaving their side. Right at this moment. Chapter 927. There was a commotion in front of them. It seemed like someone was fighting. It sounded like it was because of a tourism dispute. Hellion Vivian's eyes paused for a moment. She raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the commotion. Usually it wouldn't be serious in this place. After all, It was a key scenic spot and was protected. However, the situation was a little bad. Because it would take some time for the police to arrive, the situation would be a little difficult to control. It was like a family of four was traveling, but unlike Hellion, Vivian and the others, there was an old lady in the other party's camp. The old lady was so scared that her face turned pale. She was afraid that her son would be beaten, so she kept saying, "Forget it, forget it." The other group of people were like bandits. They looked at the middle-aged man in front of them arrogantly. Although they lowered their voices, they could be heard around them. "I'm telling you, don't be a busybody. Otherwise, we won't let you out of this place." The middle-aged man's conditions should be considered well off. He was wearing a suit, and his face was red as he said, "Call the police." When the leader heard that he was going to call the police, he surrounded him even more tightly. Not only did he beat him, but he also wanted to kick the old lady aside. However, just as that person raised his hand to kick the old lady, someone grabbed his arm. It was Hellion Vivian. She looked at the man, and there was a cold light in her eyes. "You even hit an old lady? Are you still a man?" The leading man turned his head and looked over. Originally, his face was full of fierceness, but after seeing Wei Wei's appearance in a flash, it became ambiguous. With a teasing expression, he made a yo sound and wanted to turn his hand around and touch the back of Wei Wei's hand. But before he could do that, his whole body froze. 3 figures stood in front of him. 1 was big and 2 were small. All of them were looking at him with the same gaze. There was a faint light in their eyes, like sticky blood flowing in them. The man didn't know why, but he had the illusion that he was nailed to a chopping board and would be cut into pieces at any time. Very soon, almost in the next second, he realized that it wasn't an illusion. This was because the eyes of the person standing in front of him were really blood red. The enchanting aura hidden in the darkness slowly dispersed from his eyes. His handsome face was so pale that there was almost no trace of blood. The fangs that represented evil grew in his mouth. The cold aura that was filled with dense killing intent spread out from his face that was shrouded in black fog. A bloodthirsty cruelty filled the air. That person's mouth still had an evil smile. His voice was low like a beautiful melody. "Do you want to die?" The leader shuddered at first. After all, the evil aura coming from Beligaju was too heavy, so heavy that no one could bear it. But soon, that person snorted coldly, because he had already seen the auxiliary police coming from a distance. In Lee City, no one had ever dared to say such words to him. He was someone who had connections with that person, so who wouldn't give in to him? Even if the other party was a foreigner, they would have to listen to him in Lee City. "You better get out of my way. Don't be a busybody who doesn't know how to say harsh words. You still ask me if I want to die. Let me tell you, if you dare to interfere in this matter today, don't even think about leaving Lee City. I have people above me. Be careful not to kill you." The man's face was full of fierceness. Beligaju smiled. Without saying anything, he directly stretched out a pale and colorless palm. In a strange posture that tore through the darkness, he went straight for the man's neck. Coldness was the first thing that entered the man's mind. Then it was pain, and finally it was panic. This was because he was being strangled by the neck and was lifted into the air. The feeling of his feet leaving the ground made him lose his center of gravity in an instant. His lips began to tremble slightly. Fear filled his eyes. He hissed and gasped, Let go." Because his throat was tightly strangled, it was extremely difficult for the man to even open his mouth. His legs were thumping, as if he was calling for help. "Let go of him." All the auxiliary police officers ran over with electric batons in their hands. However, Beligaju acted as if he did not hear anything. The corner of his mouth was filled with viciousness. That was a killing intent that had not been shown for a long time. His 10 ivory-like fingers were as strong as white jade. With a cruel and irresistible force, he tightly squeezed the man's neck, making it hard for him to budge. Perhaps this was the once famous overlord who ruled over the demons. "Help! Help!" The man wailed like a ghost and howled like a wolf. His face was distorted and pale. Hellion Vivian knew that this was not the time to kill anyone. She was not worried about anything, but mainly she did not want His Highness to have too much blood on his hands. Her principle of doing things had never changed. Evildoers should be punished by everyone. It was never for their own selfish desires. As Hellion Vivian thought about it, she reached out and hugged His Highness from behind. Only then did that soaring hostility calm down. Beligaju casually threw the man aside and raised his eyebrows at Hellion Vivian. "Why are you acting coquettishly?" Hellion Vivian was speechless. She had only stopped him for a moment. Was that considered acting coquettishly? She had to admit that His Highness's definition of coquettishly was really broad. Beligaju pulled Hellion Vivian over with a smile. His entire body was as noble as a flower, forming a strong contrast with the person who had fallen to the ground like a dog eating feces. That person exhaled and wanted to stand up and teach Beligaju a lesson. The person behind him reached out and pulled him back, reminding him in a deep voice, "The auxiliary police officers are here." The person in the lead spat fiercely. Before the real victim could speak, he started talking to the auxiliary police officers who had rushed over. They were all speaking in the local language. Although Hellion Vivian couldn't understand, she could tell from their attitude how rude this person was. Barbaric and uncivilized was probably referring to this kind of person. However, it was obvious that the auxiliary police officer and the person in the lead knew each other. After all, they were locals, so it wasn't strange that they knew each other. The auxiliary police officer had probably encountered this kind of thing too many times, so he could be considered to be impartial. First, he asked the group of people to leave, then glanced at Hellion Vivian and the others. Finally, his gaze landed on the middle-aged man who had been beaten up. He was more or less impatient. "I roughly understand what happened between you. Everyone knows that there's no price for jade. If you think it's worth it, then it's not worth it. If you don't think it's worth it, then it's not worth it. It's not good to make a fuss over this kind of thing." After hearing the auxiliary police officer's words, the middle-aged man's heart surged with indescribable disappointment. He originally thought that as long as the person in charge came, he would be able to give him an explanation. However, when he saw this scene, he really didn't know how to describe the feeling in his heart. Then, he looked at the panic on his old mother's face and the worried gazes of his wife and daughter. He gritted his teeth and said, "I can't just let this go." Chapter 928. Then what else do you want? The voice of the auxiliary police officer also became louder. "It's just a small matter, right? Do you have to make the old man suffer too?" The middle-aged man did not speak, but his hands were clenched into a ball. Only he himself knew how sullen his heart was. He originally spent money to have fun. Who knew that he would be bullied to this extent? The few locals' faces were full of pride. They looked at the middle-aged man condescendingly, then glanced at Beligaju's direction, as if saying that after I've dealt with him, I'll deal with you. Seeing that the middle-aged man remained silent, the auxiliary police officer's attitude softened. He reached out and patted his shoulder. All right, go back, have fun in Lee City. Such a beautiful scenery. You can't see it no matter how much money you spend." Upon hearing this, Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed with layers of coldness. Qingchen knew that it was the precursor of her anger. Sure enough, in the next second, Hellion Vivian spoke. "Excuse me, can you not see the injury on this gentleman's face? According to Article 384 of the criminal law, those who deliberately hurt the body of others shall be sentenced to imprisonment of not more than 3 years, criminal detention or public surveillance. It's obvious who is the victim in this matter. Who is the one who did it? These few." As she spoke, Hellion Vivian reached out and pointed at the leader. Starting a brawl and hurting others, shouldn't he be the one being interrogated? "You smelly." The leader saw Hellion Vivian pointing at him, and immediately became angry. The anger that he had just suffered exploded in an instant. He waved his hand, wanting to hit Hellion Vivian. This time, without waiting for Beligaju to make a move, Hellion Vivian directly grabbed the man's wrist, using a lot of strength in her fingers. The man grimaced in pain and shouted, "Ouch, ouch, ouch. You let go of me." Bang! Before the man could finish, Hellion Vivian kicked him. The kick was handsome and accurate. The speed was so fast that the man was kicked half a meter away before he could react. The auxiliary police officers were annoyed. They picked up the stun batons and pointed at Hellion Vivian. "You! legitimate self-defense. Helene Vivian cut them off. What? If you want to arrest me, that's fine. I can sue you for not only not helping the victims during the enforcement of the law, but also helping the local hooligans. I think no matter where you are, a lawyer's license will be useful. What do you think? The auxiliary police officers knew that in their line of work, they could provoke anyone but a lawyer. Lawyers were different from ordinary people. They knew the law too well. If this matter really got out of hand, it would not do them any good, even though they were hot-blooded. When the auxiliary police officers saw that the situation was not right, they did not act like they did in the past. They just looked at each other and said, "Madam, in the end, what happened today is not a big deal. There's no need to make it a big deal. Let's all take a step back. At most, I'll ask these people to apologize to you. He really should apologize, but not to me. He should apologize to his family." Helene Vivian's voice was faint, but there was an irresistible sense of oppression. The auxiliary police officers weighed the pros and cons. They looked at the leading man and reprimanded him. "Hurry up and apologize. After you apologize, this matter will be over." The leader of the group knew what the auxiliary police officers meant. If a lawyer was involved in this matter, it would not be easy to handle. After all, Lee City was their territory. If he apologized today, he could wait until there was no one around tomorrow. He could cover the heads of these people and beat them up, and they might not know about it. He had a plan in his mind. He smiled and started to call the middle-aged man, who was beaten up, brother. "Brother, none of us wanted to make this happen. This time it's my fault. I was angry too. Think about it. Buying jade is like eating. There's a price tag. You're willing to buy it, but after you've bought it and eaten it, you say you don't want it anymore. I'm not the one who sold the jade, right? How do you want me to retreat? Look, we came out to play. Isn't it just to have fun? Don't let your old mother, wife, and daughter suffer with you." On the surface, it sounded like an apology, but in fact, anyone who has been in society knew that one must consider all aspects before doing something. After all, the middle-aged man was unfamiliar with Lee City. If it wasn't for the appearance of a lawyer, the auxiliary police officers would only play down the matter and not get an apology. If he insisted on getting justice, he would probably get revenge in the end. Like what the other party said, they wouldn't even be able to leave Lee City. He didn't have anything to do with himself, but he still had his wife, daughter, and mother. If they were injured and dragged up like just now, he really couldn't do anything. This time, he would just treat it as a lesson. The middle-aged man reluctantly agreed to reconcile, and this matter finally came to an end. But it was obvious that those people were eyeing Helene Vivian and the rest. When the high school student and the old woman who bought fruit saw this, they whispered to Helene Vivian and the rest to leave as soon as possible. It would be best to leave today. Otherwise, when the auxiliary police officers were gone tomorrow, this group of people would have no scruples and would definitely find trouble with them. They were all locals, but the difference was obvious. Helene Vivian liked the ancient city of Lee City very much. It made people feel comfortable, and some children and old people were also very warm and honest. But there were some phenomena that she had to pay attention to. Perhaps this could be a breakthrough. Helene Vivian's eyes flashed. She carefully connected all the information in her mind, and seemed to have gotten some answers. The middle-aged man came over, and the whole family sincerely thanked Helene Vivian. "Thank you so much for just now. If it wasn't for your help, I really don't know what the consequences would be." Helene Vivian waved her hand and smiled. "Just what exactly happened? Why did you guys fight? Do you mind telling me? Is that person a jade salesman?" "No, not a jade salesman." The middle-aged man squeezed out a smile on his face. "They are more deceitful than jade salesmen. They are just like vampires. There is no difference. I am very grateful to these people, and the locals. It is very beautiful here. But my next plot is to remind the girls who come here to play in the future to pay attention to their safety. I hope you can play well in the future. Good night." Chapter 929. If they're not selling jade, then who are they? Helene Vivian raised her eyebrows. The middle-aged man and his mother looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with fatigue. His wife let out a long sigh and shook her head. It's all my fault. What does this have to do with you? Anyone would have thought that they would be so deceitful. The middle-aged man turned his head and said to Helian Weiwei, Here's the thing. My mother is too old and my daughter is still young. So my wife and I thought that we shouldn't go out alone this time. Everyone said that the scenery in Li City is great. So after we arrived at Kunming, we took a train and arrived here. Everything was fine at first, but after we arrived at Li City, there were very few regular taxis near the train station. Most of them were taxis doing business. We really felt the enthusiasm of Li City, so we took a taxi. The driver didn't ask for a lot of money, but he was very nice and introduced us to the scenery along the way. Then, he asked if we had booked a hotel, and if we didn't have a place to stay, he could recommend it to us. I thought he was a nice guy, so I chatted with him for a while and told him that we had booked a hotel, so we were going to have some fun here. The driver didn't force us to stay at his place. Instead, he was very enthusiastic and said that it was good to stay in the ancient city. At night, we could go to the Westerner Street. However, he said that since we were a family of 4 and had an old mother, it would be best if we could sign up for a tour. There were some places in Li City that were still very tiring, such as Tsang Mountain and Huanghuai. These were not very convenient. At first, I planned to rent a car and drive to Huanghuai after arriving in Li City. Since Tsang Mountain was a scenic spot, it was better to sign up for a tour. So I followed the driver to the travel agency he recommended. There were many people in the travel agency who were here to sign up for a tour. After seeing them, I felt relieved and paid the money to one of the tour guides. The tour guide was none other than Director Liu, who had just fought with me. At first, he was very considerate and spoke in the local dialect. He even said that we didn't need to worry about the next day, as he would send the driver to pick us up and send us to the tour bus. There were many individual tour groups like this in Li City. Under normal circumstances, there would be 2 attractions a day. The first attraction would be to visit the biculture, and the second attraction would be to visit the Romance Island in Nanzhao. My wife and I didn't think much about it. The next day, the driver who had picked us up from the train station sent us directly to the tour bus. There were about 30 people on the tour bus, all of whom were individual tour groups. Along the way, Director Liu introduced us to the local customs of Li City and told us the story of her tour group. She also told us the joke of a brother and sister who had bought a jade bracelet. She said that Li City was very close to Myanmar, so it was very convenient to obtain raw materials. The price of jade was very cheap, and there was room for promotion if you bought it back. After she finished talking, she brought the group of us to a jewelry store in Li City. The store looked very formal. Initially, I didn't have any intention to buy anything. My wife had always been good to my mother. She said that my mother's birthday was coming up soon, so she wanted to buy a jade bracelet for the elderly. Everyone knew that jade was good for the elderly, but the price of the jade bracelet was a little high, about $20,000. I was a little hesitant. The sales assistant was very professional. She held a mobile phone and taught you how to look at the purity and transparency of the jade. She said that if I was still worried, I could go to the appraisal office on the first floor to have it appraised. They were all A-grade jade, and after the purchase, they would issue a national appraisal certificate. Hearing the sales assistant's words, I was tempted. After all, this area was indeed very close to the jade production area. I thought that there shouldn't be any problems, so I let my wife pay for it. After all, it was her filial piety. At that time, my mother kept saying that she didn't want it, but I could tell that my mother liked it very much. In the end, after we left the jewelry store, the tour guide brought us to a silverware store. After a while, I realized that something was wrong. Wasn't it supposed to be a purely recreational tour? Where was the cultural tour of the Bai people? Why was it always about buying things? After the silverware store, we went to a tea shop. Indeed, the tour guide talked a little about the Bai people's culture. He said that the local people called the girls golden flower. However, after drinking tea, the girls who made the tea asked us to buy tea leaves to drink. I began to have doubts in my heart. I didn't even want to take the cruise. Before I confirmed it, I didn't dare to tell my mother and wife. However, spending money was a small matter, and my mother was already very tired. No one would be able to stand shopping like this. The first thing I did when I returned to the hotel was to make a call. I asked my friends if they knew anything about jade, and if they could help me appraise a piece of jade. After about an hour, my friend called and said that if I bought the jade bracelet in the mall, it would be worth at most $3,000. After hearing this answer, I was dumbfounded. I had expected the price to be high, at most $2,000 or $3,000. However, I didn't expect the bracelet to be worth less than a fraction of that price. I couldn't accept the fact that the real thing was worth so much less than the purchase price. I thought back to the time when I was introduced to Jubilee jewelry. I had seen on the official website that you could request a refund within 30 days. Therefore, I immediately contacted the after-sales staff of the Jubilee Jewelry Mall. The first thing they said was that they didn't want a refund. They told me to find the tour guide and asked the person who brought me to the mall to talk to me. The official website said that you could request a refund within 30 days. I had no choice but to call Director Liu that very night. When he heard that I wanted a refund, he changed his attitude completely. He mocked and ridiculed me, saying something like, "If you don't have the money, then don't come on this trip. How can you return something that you bought?" My mother was in a bad mood because of this. She felt that it was because of her that we had wasted our hard-earned money. My original intention of giving her the jade was to make her feel better. I didn't expect that it would backfire. My family listened to the tour guide's words on the phone. I felt angry and sad. We came on a trip to have fun, not to spend money to be scolded. I was so angry that I said that I wanted to complain to him, who knew that he wasn't afraid at all. He even sneered and told me that I could complain to him however I wanted. I didn't expect that there would be such an unreasonable person in this world. My chest was filled with anger, and I wanted to seek justice. Who knew? Chapter 930. The complaint line is either busy or unanswered. The middle-aged man laughed bitterly. In the end, they just ignored it. Now my heart is cold. The old woman patted him on the side, and her voice was a little hoarse. Forget it. Just treat it as spending money to buy a lesson. We can't afford to offend them. The middle-aged man accepted his mother's words, but the mood of the family of four was not good. Helene Vivian looked at them. Her voice was very light, but her eyes were filled with tenacity. She walked in front of the old woman and said, "Granny, don't worry. I will definitely make you return this jade bracelet. Keep the certificate and bracelet well. Don't drop them, and don't touch this bracelet. In 2 days, someone will give you an explanation." When the old woman heard Helene Vivian's words, she was very moved, but she still shook her head. "Miss, if you help us like this, those people probably won't let you go. I know you're a lawyer, but you're a girl after all. What if something happens?" Helene Vivian knew that the old woman was sincerely concerned about her. She chuckled and pushed Beligaju forward. "With him here, Granny, don't worry. My husband is very powerful and can fight very well. I'm not afraid of them." Beligaju did not expect that someone would push him forward. He looked back at her fluffy head. Hearing her call him husband was pleasing to the ear, so he let her be. However, even if a certain highness was indulgent, it was difficult to hide his nobility. After the old woman looked up and saw him, she kept praising a certain highness for his handsome appearance, just like on TV. Then, she looked at the pair of little people standing behind Helene Vivian, and liked them very much. The middle-aged man saw that his mother's mood had improved a little, and the depression from before had dissipated a lot. He didn't know why, but it was probably because the couple in front of him looked too different. A glimmer of hope rekindled in his heart. Perhaps this jade bracelet could really be returned. Helene Vivian asked the middle-aged man some other things, and the middle-aged man told her everything as usual. After about 10 minutes, the two families separated. One family went to Renmin Road, and the other family went to Westerner Street. Qingchen walked unsteadily beside Beligaju, trying hard to keep up with her father's pace. Beligaju's attitude towards the two little ones was the same, a free-range policy, so don't expect him to hold Qingchen's hand. Because if there was a gap, A certain highness would basically directly grab the little one by the collar and walk forward. Qingchen swayed her two short legs and was carried by her father like a plastic bag. After blinking twice in a daze, she turned her head to look at Hellion Vivian and Bailey Shangxia. As the older brother, Bailey Shangxia was the one who understood his father's character the best. He quickly rescued his younger brother from a certain highness's hands, and then clumsily carried his younger brother forward. When he was young, he was carried around by his father like a plastic bag. He definitely could not let his younger brother suffer the same, because that would be really stupid. Little Qingchen was being carried by his brother, who was only a head taller than him. When he spoke, he had to turn his little body. His childish voice was filled with logic and rigor. Pretty Wei, this whole thing was a setup from the beginning to the end. That uncle must have been deceived by the driver and the tour guide. Qingchen spoke very casually, and did not forget to take a bite of the chocolate cake that Bailey Shangxia handed to her. This was the most important thing. The two little ones used their own pocket money to buy 6 pieces of chocolate cake. Originally, they planned to eat it when they went back, but now it seemed that they could not hold it in. Hellion Vivian rubbed the little one's head. Qingchen had many inhuman abilities since she was young, among which were photographic memory and rapid thinking. Although she did not seem to have any demonic nature, in fact, all ghosts would automatically avoid her when they saw her. This was also the reason why she was not worried when Qingchen went missing from the beginning. Now this matter was just like what Qingchen said. Both the driver and the tour guide were problematic. The drivers were responsible for running around the periphery. When they encountered tourists, they were very enthusiastic to let the tourists let their guard down, and then pretended not to easily lead the tourists to the travel agency. In fact, there were already tour guides there. These drivers must have gotten a lot of benefits in the middle. Although she did not know how they divided the benefits, it was obvious that the whole thing was a trap from the beginning. This kind of situation should be common in Li City, otherwise, they would not have encountered the same situation at the airport. If this was the case, then the missing female university student. As if thinking of something, Hellion Vivian's eyes suddenly darkened, and then she smiled meaningfully. Well, today's shopping time is over. Now go back to sleep. Tomorrow we will follow the driver to see who is behind these tour guides. Tomorrow? For the people who dared to have designs on Hellion Vivian, a certain highness would not wait until tomorrow to deal with them. After arriving at the inn, while Hellion Vivian was washing up, Beligaju, who was originally lying on the bed and flipping through a magazine, reached out and put the magazine on the bedside, and then slowly tidied up his sleeves. The two little ones had just come out of the shower. Qingchen's hair was still wet, and she was wearing a long bathrobe. She shook her little head twice, and turned around to ask Bailey Shangxia, "Where is father going?" "Hunting." When Bailey Shangxia said these 2 words, a bloodthirsty red light flashed through his eyes. Then with a cool face, he took the hairdryer that was bigger than his hand, and blew Qingchen's hair one by one. Qingchen was very obedient. She sat on the bed with her 2 little legs crossed, and poked her little palm again and again. When Hellion Vivian came out to get the shower gel, she saw this scene, and did not notice that the bed on the left was empty. She took a photo of the 2 little ones with her mobile phone, and posted it on her WeChat moments. The older brother is blowing his younger brother's hair, and his little face is very serious. In an instant, her WeChat moments blew up. The rough men really could not sit still, especially old A, who held his mobile phone and typed hard, requesting to leave for Li City immediately. Of course, there were also dissenting voices. In fact, Hellion Vivian rarely used WeChat, but she would only post a status when she thought of it. This status was probably more than a year ago from the last one, and such a sudden move happened to coincide with the time when everyone was using WeChat. Naturally, it was seen by her former classmates. At the dining table of a restaurant in the capital, someone pointed at the mobile phone and said to Lady Cheng, "Meng Meng, look, it's that Hellion Vivian who used to compete with you for the campus belle. She even has a son, and 2 at once, and both of them are so handsome." Chapter 931. I saw her at the entrance of Qingqing's kindergarten 2 days ago. Her child looks good, but it's a pity that she wasn't taught well. Her character is a little irritable, and she even quarreled with Chengcheng. But she's a child after all. It's normal for children to quarrel. I Weiwei have to take care of my child alone. Not only do I have to send my child to and from school every day, I also have to repair cars for others. My life is tough, but I didn't do anything to her. After all, we were classmates before. She's raising a child by herself? A few people present exclaimed in disbelief. The person on the phone couldn't believe it. How could this be? Where's the child's father? Li Meng shook her head and said in a noble manner, Then I don't know. You know me. I don't like to ask about other people's family matters, so I just greeted Weiwei and didn't talk much. Seriously, she used to be our school belle. She was very mysterious when she was in school. Do you remember? At that time, we all thought that she came from the military compound. Back then, one of her clothes was enough for us to buy several of them. So many boys in school came to the law school just to catch a glimpse of her. I didn't expect that it would end like this. Someone sighed and shook their head. Li Meng smiled and said meaningfully, What can you tell when she's in school? After all, she was still young. It's natural for her to use all kinds of methods to get attention. Meng Meng is right. The long-haired woman sitting next to the upper-class woman curled her lips and said in a disdainful tone, How can a child who really came from the military compound be recognized by others? Like Meng Meng and I, we never talk about our families. Unlike a certain someone who was very impressive when she was in school. After graduation, everyone thought that she went abroad. She pretended to be so, but in fact she's just a car mechanic. Haha, interesting. These words were offensive. Meng Meng glanced at her and lowered her head to take a sip of the coffee in her hand. Cece, it's normal for some people to be vain. Perhaps Weiwei has her difficulties too. The class reunion is in a few days, and I've asked her out. When the time comes, if she has any difficulties, we should help her if we can. Meng Meng, you're the best. Someone held Meng Meng's hand and asked, Is Hellion Vivian really repairing cars? That's so dirty. You'll get gasoline all over your body. Li Meng sighed and put down the coffee cup in her hand. It's not just dirty. That kind of work is not something a girl should do. When the class reunion comes, you will see. She has been living outside for so many years, but she doesn't even have a car. I'm afraid she has to rent her house. It's dangerous and tiring to send her child to school on a motorcycle. TSK. Who would have thought that the great talent of the law department would end up like this? The person who called Du Cece shook her head and blew on the hot coffee in her hand. That's why it's better to be a person and not be too arrogant. When so many people in our school were chasing after her, she didn't even look at them. She always put on airs. Now she's an old woman and has to take care of her own child. What will she do in the future? Li Meng smiled. That's why we have to help her. When the time comes, we must let Weiwei join the student union. We can't let her slip away. These words sounded like they were for Hellion Vivian's good. However, if one carefully analyzed the meaning behind those words, it was not difficult to understand what Li Meng was thinking. Perhaps some girls would be like this. After entering society, no matter how many years had passed, they would want to compete with each other to see who was better. Moreover, Li Meng had always held a grudge against Hellion Vivian. At that time, Hellion Vivian was better than her in every aspect. Originally, Li Meng was such a high and mighty girl. She was born in an authentic military courtyard. Although her father's position was not very high, with her appearance, she was definitely a beauty who crushed everyone. However, ever since she was in the same class as Hellion Vivian, all her advantages disappeared. Fortunately, she was popular among the girls, and was much easier to get close to compared to Hellion Vivian. However, the man she liked the most rejected her, and told her personally that he liked Hellion Vivian. Even though she had clearly rejected him, the only person in his heart was Hellion Vivian. Until now, that man was still single. He was the school hunk of their school. After graduation, he would often be invited back to the school to give speeches. Not to mention his background, just his current achievements were enough to make many women infatuated. It was time to break that man's fantasy and let Xiao Zifeng see that the girl in his heart was no longer who she used to be. She was just a poor car mechanic. Thinking of this, Li Meng could not help but smile. She was really looking forward to the upcoming class reunion. That scene would definitely be very satisfying. The few girls then changed the topic to other topics. Everyone's expression was a little subtle. The night outside the window was getting darker. At the same time, in the old alley of Li City, in the early hours of the morning, the number of tourists on the streets gradually decreased. Occasionally, one could hear singing coming from the Tsongshan gate. A few locals gathered together and walked out of the alley. One of them was the tour guide who beat people up today. He and his brothers had just finished eating barbecue, and the smell of alcohol still lingered on their faces. Someone said in his ear, "Big brother, that female lawyer today is not bad looking, but she's a little difficult to deal with." "What are you afraid of? We have people behind us." Director Lu sneered and shouted to the front, "Remember, you don't have to be afraid of anything. If she continues to be a busybody, someone will take care of her tomorrow night." That female university student was the same. She insisted on causing trouble. Although I wasn't the one who let her, I still know the result. Those who obstructed that person's path and tried to expose this matter will not have a good ending. When the time comes, if that female lawyer doesn't listen to us, we'll deal with her. You can do whatever you want. When Director Lu finished speaking, the few of them were still laughing. However, after a few seconds the laughter stopped. Director Lu suddenly bumped into the people in front of him and said unhappily, "Hey, what's wrong with you guys? Why didn't you stop?" The two people in front did not respond at all. However, the one standing in front of him began to tremble all over. Chapter 932. Director Lu cursed under his breath. Then, under the influence of alcohol, he pushed the person away. He saw a black figure standing not far from them. He wasn't holding anything in his hands, and the finely crafted white gloves accentuated his flawless fingers. However, he reeked of blood. The cold night cast a shadow over his body. Black feathers appeared out of nowhere, falling from the sky and landing at his feet. Director Lu was on guard. He took a closer look and sneered. "I was wondering who it was. So it's you. I didn't go looking for you, but you came knocking on my door." As he spoke, he winked at the person beside him. However, the person did not move an inch. His eyes were shaking, and his face was filled with fear. Director Lu clenched his teeth and was about to push him away when the black figure slowly raised his eyes. His beautiful peach blossom eyes were completely dyed red. He looked like a vampire aristocrat in the movies who had turned into a demon, exuding a menacing aura that made people want to run away. The more handsome he was, the more dangerous he was. The more he smiled, the more darkness surged out from behind him. It was as if there was something behind him. Director Lu was so scared that he woke up from his drunken stupor. His face was pale, and he wanted to run, but no one gave him the time to do so. The black shadow looked at him and slowly narrowed his cold eyes. In an instant, countless demons surged out from the darkness and bit the person in front of him to the side. Hot blood splattered everywhere. "Ah!" A blood-curdling scream echoed through the long alley. Director Lu could only watch helplessly as his companion was snatched away. Blood and flesh splattered all over his face. He wanted to scream, but he realized that he could not make a single sound. Fear swept through his body like a tidal wave. Other than the desire to live on, there was nothing else in his mind. He even wanted to kneel down and beg for mercy, but the darkness had already begun to approach him. Under the light cast by the moon, a devilish silhouette was reflected in the light. Amidst the sea of blood, that slender figure spoke in a low voice with a hint of laughter. His voice was very pleasant to the ears, but it also contained an aura that didn't belong to the mortal world. It was like the chanting of a demon. "I'm not as good-tempered as Wei Wei. I'll deal with you all tomorrow." The black feathers fell. It took only a few minutes. The long alley was plunged into darkness, as if no one had ever existed. The figure watched the scene and curled his thin lips. He walked away with long legs and slowly merged with the darkness. After Hellion Wei Wei posted on her WeChat moments, she chatted with her brothers for a while. After assigning all the necessary tasks to Monkey and S, She looked up and saw a certain highness walking in from outside. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "When did you leave?" "Just now. I went downstairs to get a bottle of red wine." Bailey Jiaju lied without batting an eyelid. He glanced sideways and reached out to pick up 2 wine glasses. However, when his gaze fell on his gloves, his brows furrowed. Then he took off the glove on his left hand and casually threw it into the trash can. Then, he turned his head again and met Hellion Weiwei's eyes. Hellion Vivian walked over. "What's wrong with the gloves? Why did you throw them away?" "They're dirty." His Highness stopped her effortlessly and pulled her into his arms. Weiwei always felt that with his Highness' temperament, he shouldn't have dirtied his gloves. However, after thinking about it carefully, His Highness's obsession with cleanliness might have flared up. So she didn't think too much about it. She held the wine cup and started drinking. As soon as she took a sip of red wine, she received a message on WeChat. It said that there would be a class reunion in a week, and asked if she would attend. Hellion Weiwei had never liked to participate in these kinds of things. She was different from others. Others would only start working after their 4th year of university. But the reason why she went to university was only to cover up her identity as the Queen of Arms. That was why she chose to study law. Of course, young Master Tang had asked her to choose. In the Tang sect, everyone had a hidden identity. This identity would always be used to hide their true identity. In fact, she hadn't gone to class after her 3rd year of university, so she wouldn't attend any class gatherings. Unexpectedly, before she could refuse, the person on the other side spoke again. "We just happened to meet. Let's talk about your son hitting Chung Chung." "Hit?" Hellion Vivian looked at the phone screen and raised her eyebrows. She swirled the wine glass and looked at Qingchen, who was still poking her palm cutely. She narrowed her eyes. She knew her son very well. Although he never played with children his age, he would not take the initiative to hit anyone, especially humans who were weak in his eyes. In some ways, the 3 of them were the same. They were extremely arrogant. Qingchen saw that Hellion Vivian was looking at her, so she ran over and held her little head for Hellion Vivian to smell. "Big brother, wash my hair. It smells so good." Hellion Vivian felt that ever since Dabao appeared, she was basically dispensable in front of Qingchen. Bailey Shangxia was still wiping the baby golden water on little Qingchen's face and hands. He was doing a very professional job. Hellion Vivian hugged the 2 little guys and kissed each of them. Then she picked up the phone and replied with one word. "Okay." Her son got into a fight. There must be a reason. She wanted to know how the other party had provoked Qingchen. Originally, when His Highness saw the words class reunion, his eyes began to sink. He had been in the modern world for 3 years, so of course he understood modern life. A class reunion mostly meant that there would be old sentiments. Although Bailey Jiaju didn't like to use this word. But when Hellion Weiwei agreed to go, his fingers paused for a moment. The color of his pair of eyes deepened a lot. Then, he raised his head and finished the red wine in the goblet. His thin lips revealed a faint smile, as if he was planning something. Bailey Shangxia knew his imperial father the best, including why his imperial father's gloves were dirty. He just didn't know what his imperial father was planning to do to his imperial mother. In short, his father was a shameless and pretentious person. Apart from his mother who would spoil him, the rest would only be afraid of him. Hellion Vivian did not know that the content of her WeChat had been seen by His Highness. She lowered her head and arranged for the 2 little ones to sleep. She planned to settle the matter in Li City tomorrow, and then fly back to the capital. Chapter 933. The driver thought that it was the same as before, that he had encountered a gullible fat sheep. He did not know that the small device hidden in Hellion Vivian's long hair was very advanced. In addition to recording and video, it could also be synchronized to the internet. The driver didn't even realize that his license plate number had been taken down, and his words had been recorded, just like what the middle-aged man described before. The driver brought Hellion Vivian and the rest onto a tour bus, which was specially designed to pick up individual tourists. These buses would depart from a bus station in Li City on time, and each bus was accompanied by a tour guide. Hellion Vivian's tour guide called himself Tour Guide Xiao, a native of Lee City. He looked very humorous. During the 10-minute drive, he talked about a lot of local customs. At first, it did not sound like much, but the more he talked about, the more obvious the words about jade became. At this time, some of the early risers on the bus wanted to take a nap on the bus, while others wanted to sit and chat with each other, because they were all here to have fun. After all, the journey to the scenic spot was an hour long. Soon tour guide Xiao was a little unhappy. He glanced at the two girls who were whispering and said, "Don't talk nonsense when others are introducing you. This is polite. Listen to me. The most important thing is to have a good attitude. When you see something you like, you have to buy it quickly. We will arrive at the scenic spot soon. I don't want to see you there. Some people hide in the toilet and don't come out once they arrive at the scenic spot. We guides are not scourges. We don't have to be afraid of spending money when we are out to have fun. The things here are all good. Everyone knows that this place is close to Myanmar, so buy whatever you can." The whole thing was about jade. Helene Vivian could feel that the two girls sitting behind her had a conflict in their hearts when they heard the tour guide's words. They were whispering about something. After arriving at the station, it was the Happy Town jewelry mall that the middle-aged man had heard of before. There were jade pieces everywhere, and there was also a stone gambling area underground. Every stone was marked with a price, and anyone who took a fancy to it could cut it. As the saying goes, one cut can be poor, one cut can be rich. This saying came from gambling on stones. If there was green in the stone, then one could make a fortune. Qingchen was originally very fond of this kind of thing. However, after seeing the stones here, she spread out her little hands. Not a single one of them had much green in it. Since he was no longer interested, he obediently followed Bailey Shangxie's lead and strolled around, looking at this and that. After taking a stroll, she returned and reported to Helene Vivian, "I've seen all of them. Basically, the price of each piece of jade is inflated. The foot-grinding jade that Uncle Monkey gave me previously is estimated to be sold for 40,000 yuan here. However, Uncle Monkey said that he only spent 4,000 yuan when he received it. It's so expensive here." "That's right." Helene Vivian smiled evilly, then pressed the Bluetooth headset. "Monkey, are you there?" On the other end of the phone, Monkey immediately stopped playing League of Legends on his computer and said excitedly into his earpiece, "Boss, is Little Boss looking for me? I knew Little Boss can't do without me." "Get lost." Olde pushed Monkey away. "Little Boss should be looking for me, not you." Helene Vivian could not help but hold her forehead. She waited for the other side to quiet down before saying, "Okay, let's get down to business. Monkey, find out who is the owner of Lee City's Happy Town Jewelry Mall, and what's the relationship behind it. Once you're done, send me a photo. I have 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I want to see all the information about this place." Yes. When they entered working mode, the rough men were obviously different. Monkey was in charge of the invasion, while the others were in charge of the armed equipment. They had obtained the authority from young Master Tang. Once the evidence was conclusive, they could immediately arrest the relevant personnel in secret. Such an operation was S-level in the mainland. The S-level meant that no one would get the news, and all the deployment would be done directly by the Tang sect. Therefore, the sky above Lee City was still calm and peaceful. Almost an hour later, tour guide Xiao walked over. When he saw the two female college students empty-handed and did not buy anything, his attitude immediately became very bad. He said to the two female college students with a cold face, "Both of you are here to enjoy the service, but the two of you are so good, not buying anything. Next time, don't come out to travel, it's better to stay at home." No one was willing to be talked to like that. One of the two female college students had a stronger temper and said directly, "We are here to travel, not to shop. We don't buy anything if we don't want to." When tour guide Xiao heard this, his nostrils suddenly widened, and he suddenly looked a little fierce. "Little girls, don't be so rash. Buying something is to ensure your safety." Seeing him like this, the other one was suddenly a little scared and reached out to pull her companion. A few tour guides looked over at the same time. They definitely did not look friendly. After all, they were all girls. If they were to quarrel outside, they would be the ones to suffer. Tour guide Xiao saw that they had shown their weakness and would not make any more trouble, so he impatiently asked them to stay at the side. He then turned to look at Hellion Vivian's family and saw that their hands were empty-handed. He sneered and walked to Beligaju. You guys don't seem to have bought anything either. Brother, I'll give you the same words. Don't come out to travel if you don't have money. If you don't buy anything, how is this different from freeloading? If you are poor, then you should stay at home. No money. Poor. Freeloading? When Bailey Shangxia heard these adjectives, he held Qingchen's hand and slightly raised his head. How much gold, silver, and jewelry were there in the demon world? If he told this human being, he would be scared to death. Moreover, when he was in England, in order to find his mother faster, his father had already done a lot of things in the human world, let alone in China. In his opinion, this human was about to die, because the smile on his father's face was too obvious. It was so obvious that all existences and dark creatures around felt a strong sense of uneasiness, including the two reapers in Qingchen's hand. Is this person stupid, huh? Is he stupid? Of all people to provoke, he just had to provoke the great demon. If he was unhappy, he could destroy the human world. Damn, he was retarded. This kind of person should be immediately taken to the 18th level of hell, so that he would not show off his intelligence in the human world. What? Not talking? Are you scared out of your wits? Chapter 934. Bam! Before Director Xiao could finish his words, he was kicked into the jade cabinet by Beligaju. He was in so much pain that he flipped back and forth. Beligaju tidied up his jacket and stepped on Director Xiao's back with a handsome smile. Didn't you want me to buy something? How much do you think your life is worth? Name a price and I'll buy it. Director Xiao did not expect to meet such a tourist. Usually, the tourists he met either brought their families with them and did not want to make a big deal out of it, or because they were in a foreign country and had to worry about being surrounded if they made a move. Therefore, most of them would choose to swallow their anger and humiliation. Some were even afraid of him. No one dared to come up to him and kick him over. The anger in Director Zhao's heart overshadowed the pleasure. His mouth was full of blood and he kept coughing. He reached out to the tour guide and the shop assistant beside him, thinking that he must kill this kid and let him know the consequences of offending him. Such a big commotion was bound to alarm the security personnel in the mall and the local auxiliary police station not far away. These auxiliary police and tour guides knew each other. They surrounded Beligaju in 2s and 3s and were about to take him away. Hellion Vivian moved and stood in front of His Highness. Her thin lips curved slightly. You're arresting people without asking for the reason? Are you sure you want to do this? Why do you have to ask for the reason when you maliciously hurt people? The auxiliary police didn't speak. The person in charge of the jewelry mall was impatient. Take him away now. How dare you cause trouble here? Don't you know whose territory this is? Hellion Weiwei glanced at him and raised the phone in her hand. I've recorded the reason for the attack in my phone. Since the auxiliary police are here, I have something to say. This is Director Xiao. He forced people to spend money, slandered others, and humiliated the passengers. These things are enough for you to take him in and interrogate him carefully. According to the travel regulations, this has violated our rights as tourists. Now I am very suspicious. Does he have a travel permit? Also, is the price of the jade artifact here artificially high? Were the merchants and the tour guides colluding to cheat the tourists of their money? These things have not been investigated clearly. Sorry, we are just defending our legal rights as citizens by beating people up. Why should we be taken away? I think you really won't cry until you see the coffin. The person in charge of the jewelry store was furious. His face was full of muscles. All of our jade wares are A-grade. If you can't afford it, just say so. Why are you stirring up trouble here? Take them away. Take them all away. Hearing this, the auxiliary police began to move. Hellion Vivian looked up at them. Her eyes were as cold as ice. She didn't speak to them, but to the people on the other side of the earpiece. Move. With these 2 words, Monkey started typing furiously on the keyboard. The person in charge and the tour guide were bent on letting Hellion Vivian and the rest have a taste of their wrath. On the other side, Monkey had already sent a few examples of being cheated on during a trip to the Commission for Discipline Inspection in the form of a report. Then, he directly uploaded the video sent by Hellion Vivian to a certain Weibo and began to broadcast it live. This time, he didn't immediately make this Weibo popular, because it wasn't time yet. The others were all ready to go, waiting for Hellion Vivian to give the second order. After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, the tourists in the jewelry store were more or less a little apprehensive. They were afraid that they would really buy an overpriced jade. The cash flow at the transaction counter suddenly decreased. The more the person in charge watched, the angrier he became. He looked at Hellion Vivian with eyes full of hostility. He looked as if he couldn't wait to beat her to death. His expression was extremely cruel. After standing up, tour guide Xiao didn't hesitate to speak magnanimously and asked the auxiliary police officers to teach them a lesson. These blind poor people didn't know how to be convinced. Hellion Vivian looked at the nearest auxiliary police officer, who was about to make a move. She slowly raised the ID in her hand and said, "I'm a lawyer. The law I studied tells me that the victim shouldn't be detained in any form. If you don't know this, you can go back and flip through the textbooks. If you arrest me, you can forget about wearing this uniform again." The auxiliary police officer was obviously hesitant. The person in charge sneered. "I, CEO Wang, have seen all kinds of situations. Why would I be afraid of a small lawyer like you? Now you're the one who doesn't have money. You're causing trouble here. And you want to talk to me about the law? Who said we don't have money?" Hellion Vivian turned her head and took out the Gucci wallet from Beligage's trouser pocket. She threw it over casually. There were more than 10,000 yuan in the wallet, not to mention various US dollars, euros, and 3 or 4 gold cards. The person in charge and tour guide Xiao looked at those things and suddenly felt like they were slapped in the face. The other tourists also understood what was going on. It was obvious that the other party wasn't like what the tour guide said. They couldn't afford the jade here, but they suspected that there was something wrong with it, so they didn't buy it. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the person in charge. "It's the same whether we have money or not. No one is willing to be a fat sheep to be slaughtered. So what if we don't buy it, because we don't have money? Doing business is all about being willing. If we don't buy it, do you have the right to insult the customers? We're here to have fun, not to look at anyone's face. We've spent money to sign up for the tour, so we should be respected. We shouldn't be ridiculed here after we failed to force a deal." Tour guide Zhao's voice was gloomy. "You only have 400 or 500 yuan to sign up for the tour. We're the ones who paid as much as you asked. Now you're accusing us of paying too little?" Hellion Weiwei glanced at the surrounding tourists and said in a calm voice, "Don't you think this whole thing is hilarious? Who made the tour guide of Li City so fearless?" "Enough." A man in a suit came in from the outside and looked around. He didn't speak to Hellion Vivian, but said to the auxiliary police officer beside him, "Secretary Liang is still having a meeting nearby and is entertaining foreign guests. It's not good for you to be so noisy. Something has happened, and it's affecting the public order, so solve it quickly. Do you still need me to teach you what to do?" As he said, he turned his head and said to the person in charge of the jewelry, "Mr. Wang, Li City is a tourist city, and you're the biggest investor in Li City. It's our fault for not doing a good job in maintaining order. If this lady doesn't want to buy the jade, then don't let her buy it. If word got out, it would seem that Li City's management is not doing a good job. You know how much sleep the secretary has lost because of this." Chapter 935. You're right, Secretary Liu. After all, there is some misunderstanding in this matter. The person in charge of the mall said with obvious respect. Of course, people who come to buy things are willing. We can't force them to buy or sell, right? This lady is overthinking. Director Xiao just gave her a few words of advice, and she started beating people up. It's probably because of her strong self-esteem. I don't understand why she feels that her self-esteem is hurt, and why she has to beat people up to vent their anger. Since Secretary Liu is here, let's forget about this matter. After all, we are doing business amicably for the sake of the construction of Li City. Of course, We adhere to the principle of customer first. Since this lady doesn't want to buy, then wait outside. Don't slander the jade of our mall. It's really impossible for us to do business. After the person in charge finished his words, it seemed that Hellion Vivian and the rest were simply making trouble without reason. In fact, the truth was very clear. However, it was obvious that the secretary who came was on the side of the person in charge of the mall. Naturally, he knew how to give everyone a way out without letting the situation develop further. He glanced at the auxiliary police next to him and said, "In the future, it's wrong for troublemakers to disturb the public order regardless of their identity. This time, we'll forget about it. The matter ends here. If anyone doesn't want to stay here, please ask them to leave." Yes. The auxiliary police also followed the order to enforce the law. Hellion Vivian looked at this scene and said slowly, "Wait a minute, Secretary Liu, right? You seem to have misunderstood the focus of this matter." Secretary Liu did not expect that the person in front of him would be so ignorant. A light flashed under the bottom of his eyes. During this period of time, the secretary had reminded him that the child trafficking case in Yun City involved a large area. The higher-ups were keeping a close eye on it and asked his subordinates to be more careful. He would have asked people to arrest these tourists long ago. Some nouveau riche always thought that with some money, they could protect their rights. However, they did not think about who was standing in front of them. Taking a step back, if the other party was not a lawyer, but an ordinary female college student, he would still teach her a lesson. People like her who made noise everywhere knew that there was a problem with the jade here. When the time came to check, they would definitely be held accountable. Thinking of this, Secretary Liu's expression turned cold. "Miss, do you know who you are talking to?" "I really don't know who you are. I only know that you're here not to help the people solve their problems, but to add fuel to the fire of Li City's broken tourism industry." Hellion Weiwei looked into his eyes and suddenly smiled. "The main point has never been whether we buy jade or not, but how we are treated after we spend the money and get cheated. In other words, we are the victims. As a secretary, shouldn't you listen to what the victim has to say? Otherwise, Secretary Liu, how can you continue to be a secretary?" When Secretary Liu heard the last sentence, his eyes completely darkened. In his eyes, Hellion Vivian's actions were reckless. Secretary Liu did not know that before Hellion Vivian said this, she had already ordered Monkey and everyone else to take action. All the video content spread rapidly through the influence of a certain Weibo. This included all the recordings of the driver, tour guide, as well as the person in charge of the mall and Secretary Liu. Especially the attitude of the tour guide. It was to the point of angering both humans and gods. In addition to the summary of more than a dozen previous complaints. Soon, this incident attracted the attention of all the netizens. This included the commander of Li City, Inspector Jiang, who had once carried out a mission with Hellion Vivian. When he saw the video, his first reaction was that it was over. How could this group of people surround Hellion Vivian? What a bunch of fucking good-for-nothings. Inspector Jiang put on his military cap and was about to rush out. The soldier next to him was puzzled. "Major, it's almost time for dinner. Where are you going?" "Where am I going?" "To clean up the mess." Inspector Jiang turned around and pointed at Hellion Vivian on the screen. "See this person if she's hurt. Don't expect the Tang sect to be involved in future battles. That's the boss of the ghost organization." Heh. To think that a certain secretary is still thinking of getting in touch with the Tang sect. This time, his secretary is going to block people. What do you think the consequences will be? The soldier shook his head, still confused. Inspector Jiang did not say anything to him. He picked up a Hummer and drove to the scene of the incident. At this time, Secretary Liu smiled coldly. "Miss, why do I find that you have a tendency to be ass?" Hellion Vivian took a step forward. "Today, I'm the one standing here. I can talk to you about the law to protect my rights. In fact, in China, very few people know the law, let alone how to protect their rights. If the person standing here today was not me, but a university student who did not have the ability to protect herself, what would they face?" "Secretary Liu, have you thought about this problem?" "You can say whatever you want now." Secretary Liu's voice was still deep. But I'm warning you, don't think that you can incite the crowd just because you're a lawyer. I have the right to arrest you." As soon as he finished speaking, the phone in his pocket rang. Secretary Lu looked at the caller ID on the screen and picked up the call carefully. "Secretary, yes, I'm at the jewelry store." "What? Video? She's secretly recording?" Secretary Lu paused, and his eyes became more gloomy. He could not hear the rest of the words at all. Then he hung up the phone and called the person in charge of the jewelry store outside. He lowered his voice and said, "This is a little troublesome now, and it's not convenient for me to intervene. I'll watch outside later. Ask everyone to disperse and stop making things difficult for this woman. She seems to have a camera on her, and she doesn't seem to be a lawyer. She's probably a reporter. If things get out of hand, it won't be easy to clean up. But don't worry, we've just checked her background, and she's not a big deal. It's easy to deal with her. When you disperse later, if she still doesn't let go of this matter, you can deal with her the way you dealt with that university student. But just one thing, try not to get to this point. Previously, because of the secretary, we were able to cover up the news of the university student's disappearance. This time, you have to think of a way to make her give in and let her know how strong our backing is. She can't change anything with just a few words of incitement. Do you understand what I mean?" CEO Wang of the jewelry store nodded. He rubbed his wine belly with his left hand and thought to himself, "Things have already come to this point, isn't it obvious? A lousy reporter with no background wants to ruin our business. Isn't she looking for trouble?" Chapter 936. The matter on the internet was still fermenting. A secretary was very unhappy that it would cause such a bad influence, so he directly called the relevant law enforcement department. The law enforcement department that was reprimanded blamed the problem on the tourists and posted on Weibo, saying, "When tourists encounter problems, the first thing they do is not to think about solving the problem, but to calculate in their hearts." Originally, they said this to control public opinion. They did not expect that some of the words would be so eye-catching. Once the words were out, all kinds of disputes continued. Those who agreed with this statement praised them as enlightening. Those who did not even accept it even criticized the law enforcement department as robbers. There were too many tourists who encountered this kind of coercion. There was no need for Helly and Vivian to do anything, and there would be a continuous stream of people joining in the condemnation. True justice was often invisible. Most of the time, we did not make a sound because we were kind or did not want to cause trouble. But once the bottom line was crossed, no one would continue to ignore the existence of such behavior. Sometimes, netizens really did not know what was the truth, but this matter was already very clear. The video explained everything, and the truth was revealed bit by bit. This was clearly a trap set by the drivers, tour guides, and shopping malls, as well as the lax management of the relevant departments. People did not have the right to make those who had been in a high position for a long time realize their mistakes. Because once the matter was out, they would only think of ways to explain. But there was such a power in this world. We have a tacit understanding, we express our opinions, we maintain our education, and do not make too many judgments. But we have to let more people know what dangers were, and how to avoid these dangers. The Guru Anjihu wrote 3 essential points, which were suitable for each tourist city. Do not sign up for local individual groups. Do not ask the local drivers, and avoid eating at scenic spots as much as possible. After all, the incident of the sky-high price of fish was still vivid in people's minds. Such situations would not be put to an end, because every city needed to be built. Without these economic sources, the local people would be the ones to suffer. The people who were really at the top wanted everyone to be harmonious, but the perfection of the system could not be completely implemented locally. Some people still had selfish motives. For example, a certain person in Li City thought that he could control the overall situation, as long as the emperor was far away. But today's scene was something he had never seen before. However, compared to the one in Cloud City, he was much calmer and knew what to say at the right time. Therefore, he quickly asked a certain department to issue an apology on Weibo. Then he carried out a series of appeasement. After doing this, he narrowed his eyes and instructed his subordinates. Tell Secretary Lu that when the heat of this matter dies down, think of a way to make the person who exposed it suffer a little. She dares to say anything, she deserves to suffer a little. When Secretary Lu received the news, he simply called CEO Wang and told him that they would not interfere in this matter, and that he could vent his anger however he wanted. However, there was still one thing to be careful about, which was not to let anyone know. CEO Wang held the phone and looked down at the family, who was still standing in the middle of the jewelry city. He smiled coldly. Secretary Lu's words were very clear. If it was at the beginning, he would still have some scruples. Now, he was asking him to shut the door and beat the dog. As long as no one knew, even if he killed this little reporter, the guards outside would not rush in. That was easy. CEO Wang glanced at the security guards and asked them to take the other tourists to the side. Then, he personally went down to talk to Hellion Vivian in private. He did not forget that Hellion Vivian had a camera on her, so he disguised his attitude very well. CEO Wang thought that if he lowered himself to invite her, she would definitely not notice. But he did not know that in the eyes of Her Highness, the dirtier a human being was, the easier it was to see through him. As smart as Hellion Vivian was, she only needed a glance to know what he was up to. Did he want to get rid of them secretly? In that case, she would accompany him and see who would be dealt with when the time came. After all, it was about time for a certain major to appear. Please. Hellion Vivian was the first to speak. Bailey Jiaju glanced at her. No matter what the occasion was, his raised eyebrows always gave people a sense of noble arrogance. Hellion Vivian felt that she had to smooth over His Highness when they went back. After all, it had been 4 hours since they came out. His Highness was completely dragged out of bed by her. The devil's temper when he woke up would really last for a long time. Bailey Shangxia also knew how difficult it was to deal with his father, who did not have enough sleep. Under normal circumstances, the entire demon world would tremble in fear because of him. Although he never spoke, he only sat in the highest position, supported his chin with one hand, and looked at everyone with a smile that was not a smile. But the lethality of it was not inferior to the explosion of an atomic bomb. Let's stay away from father later. Bailey Shangxia's little face was serious, as he reminded Qingchen in his hand. The little one nodded her head obediently, swinging her little hand as she followed beside Bailey Shangxia. When she walked, she would always sway. Seeing how cooperative the family was, CEO Wang's smile grew wider. He walked around the corridor outside and brought Hellion Vivian and the others to the meeting room, where secret deals were held every time. Cell phones were not connected here, and similarly, the internet was not connected. Hellion Vivian could clearly hear the sound of the Bluetooth headset buzzing. A few sports cars sitting not far away started their cars at the same time, after the video signal was cut off. They smoothly sped to the foot of Tsang Mountain, drawing beautiful arcs in the air one after another. The ghost had really made a move. At this time, Secretary Lu was still in a reception room outside the mall, drinking tea and waiting for CEO Wang to solve the problem and give him a satisfactory answer, so that he could vent his anger. One had to know that ever since he became this secretary, even the big shots in the business world had to respect him. A small reporter actually embarrassed him in front of so many people. She was simply tired of living. Has CEO Wang made a move? Almost. He has been invited to the meeting room. There should be news soon. Then tell the people outside to stay in their positions. No matter what they hear, don't rush in. We won't interfere in this matter. The people beside Secretary Lu nodded. Of course, they would obey the order. With such a relationship, President Wang did not have to hide anything when he did things. With a click, he locked the door and dragged Bailey Shangxia, who was the closest to him, over. With a fierce expression he said, "This is more suitable for me to talk to." Chapter 937. Oh. Beligaju raised his good-looking eyebrows again. The unique evil of a demon broke out from his handsomeness. No one knew why, at that moment. There seemed to be some kind of black fog surging behind him, but it was clearly broad daylight. His Highness looked at CEO Wang with a playful gaze. His words, actions, and expression were all unhurried. The corners of his lips curled up slightly with a playful expression. If I'm not mistaken, are you threatening me? CEO Wang laughed and then sneered. His eyes were gloomy. It seems that you're not too stupid. Today's matter is to let you know what to care about, and what not to care about. I'll count to 3. Hand over all the information about today's matter, and squat down on the side. Otherwise, this child's pretty little face will be cut a few times. I can't guarantee that. Faced with such a threat, Beligaju only curled his lips and said indifferently, I hate it when people threaten me. Hellion Vivian and the 2 little ones heard this, and nodded together. They sincerely agreed with this point of view. Fighting with His Highness would not end well in the end. Many people knew that the existence of a demon was a kind of sinister beauty, and this point was vividly displayed by Beligaju. Every word he said and every action he did seemed leisurely and elegant. But in fact, the coldness in his eyes was the most common killing intent. After all, killing people had always been a convenient thing for him. However, CEO Wang had been too carefree all these years. He did not know how terrible it was to offend His Highness. He sneered and began to count down. 1. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at this person who was courting death. She was not worried that Bailey Shangxia would be hurt, but she and His Highness would deal with the person who kidnapped her son and threatened her in the same way. Therefore, before CEO Wang could count to 2, Hellion Vivian pulled off her earphones with a snap. CEO Wang only had time to see her turn around and knock the security guard to the ground. She was about to attack him. This change was too fast. It was so fast that Mr. Wang was caught off guard. He thought that even if someone was going to make a move, it would be that man. How did it become a woman? CEO Wang didn't know about this. His Highness had never liked fighting. What he liked was killing. President Wang realized that someone was approaching him. He lifted Bailey Shangxia up and placed him in front of Beligaju. I'm warning you, don't come any closer. If you take one more step, I'll throw him to the ground and kill him. Beligaju laughed again. He stood there condescendingly and said, Haven't you had enough fun yet? This sentence was not directed at CEO Wang, but at the little boy in his hand. Everyone felt that something was amiss, including the bodyguards who were knocked to the ground. They felt that this was not something an ordinary father would say to his son. The most unsettling thing was the change in the little boy. He seemed to be smiling. The corners of his mouth curled up into a sinister arc. His gem-like eyes were filled with a blood-red cold light, which made everyone feel uneasy from the bottom of their hearts. President Wang lowered his eyes and looked at Bailey Shangxia in his hand. He could not see any fear in Bailey Shangxia's eyes. Not only that, there was a noble arrogance on Bailey Shangxia's cool little face, as if he was mocking his stupidity. Go to hell. Bailey Shangxia said these 3 words very slowly. It was so slow that CEO Wang's face turned pale. He didn't know why, but an unbelievable thought flashed through his mind. The little boy in his hand wasn't a human at all. How could a child have such a terrifying aura? CEO Wang was frightened by his own thoughts. It was as if he was bitten by a snake. He immediately let go of the hand that was holding Bailey Shangxia. At this moment, outside the meeting room, Secretary Lu lit a cigarette and guessed that the matter should be more or less settled. Those people who thought that they could protect their rights because they were educated were like this. They didn't know the ways of the world and didn't know how to judge the situation. They had to wait until the situation was out of hand before they realized that some people weren't people they could afford to offend. They were stupider than pigs. Thinking of this, Secretary Lu stood up and walked out with his men. This period of time was different from before. He couldn't let people go missing again. A few days ago, that university student had accidentally hit someone too hard. This time he had to remind them. At most, he would make them unable to say anything. He would spend some money and say that they accidentally rolled down the mountain while traveling. Then this matter would be over. He believed that when the time came, that arrogant woman would learn to stay in her place obediently. She didn't want to be a busybody. Secretary Lu finished the last puff of his cigarette and gave the person beside him a look. He was about to ask him to go in and inform CEO Wang. A black Hummer with a military license plate braked and stopped in front of him. Before the sound of tires screeching faded, a person walked out of the car. He was still wearing his camouflage military uniform and looked like he had just rushed over from the army. He didn't even take off his military cap. Secretary Liu didn't pay much attention at first. However, when he saw the face under the military cap, he couldn't remain calm anymore. He lowered his body and extended his hand. "Major, why are you here? Are you here to look for the secretary? The secretary is still handling documents in the office. Why don't I take you there personally?" When facing Inspector Jiang, Secretary Liu was very respectful. The other party held a high position and had connections in the capital. Even the secretary had to treat Inspector Jiang with respect, let alone him. He heard that Inspector Jiang was very close to the Tang family. If he could get in touch with this person, he would have a lot of opportunities in the future. It had to be said that Secretary Liu's plan was very good. Unfortunately, Inspector Jiang was now in a fit of anger. Especially when he saw Secretary Liu in the video, his eyes turned red. He didn't care about the military salute anymore. He pulled Secretary Liu's collar over and asked, "Where is she?" Secretary Liu was stunned by Inspector Jiang's question. "She? Who? Where did the girl who recorded the video go?" Inspector Jiang saw that there were so many auxiliary police officers outside, but they were not patrolling. Instead, they were guarding around the conference room. His eyes immediately darkened, and he hoped that something he didn't want to see would not happen. Secretary Liu didn't know what was on Inspector Jiang's mind. He thought that Inspector Jiang had come because he felt that the video had a bad influence on him. He chuckled and said, "Major, don't worry. The things that should be dealt with have almost been dealt with. No one will say anything in the future." Chapter 938. Rest assured my ass. Did I say that I would let you handle it? Have you ever considered other people's feelings before acting on your own accord? You're simply courting death. Inspector Jiang took a deep breath. "Don't tell me that you've made a move?" Secretary Liu was very puzzled. "Is there a problem?" There was a big problem. Inspector Jiang pushed him away. Then, he grabbed him and gently patted his face. "I have to let you see for yourself what exactly went wrong." At this moment, Secretary Liu faintly felt that something was not right. At this moment, the sound of tires screeching on the road sounded behind him again. However, this time, it was fiercer and more violent than when Inspector Jiang came. 6 sports cars lined up in a row in front of him. S walked out of the sports car with a submachine gun in one hand. After seeing Inspector Jiang, he smiled. "Old Jiang, it's better for us to stand up for boss. Whoever interferes in this matter will be arrested immediately." "Wait a minute. I want to say that I'm with him." When Inspector Jiang saw that all 6 of them had moved out, he cursed. Then, he solemnly pointed at Secretary Liu. "We're not on the same side. I'm here purely because I saw Boss Wei Wei in the video and came to help." We know. Old A also came over. He held a gun in one hand and put his arm on Inspector Jiang's shoulder with the other. "Although you're a little wretched, you won't make a mistake when it comes to righteousness." The corner of Inspector Jiang's mouth twitched. "Are you praising me?" "Of course," Old A said very seriously. Inspector Jiang was about to go crazy. He couldn't tell that it was a compliment at all. At this moment, Secretary Liu was already shocked by the scene in front of him. He was afraid that he would be so scared that he couldn't speak for the first time. Even his legs were a little weak. That was a genuine submachine gun. In the mainland, only special forces were allowed to carry it. Moreover, why were these people here? Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Soon, Secretary Liu knew why that murderous intent was. This was because a slender young man bent his knee and placed one hand on his shoulder. He heavily pressed his knee against his abdomen. His voice was cold and emotionless as he said, "Where did you take our boss and little boss?" "Boss? Little boss? I don't know what you're talking about." Secretary Liu was really confused. He had never seen any boss or little boss before. Who are they? He didn't even dare to guess the identity and background of the person who acted so recklessly in front of Major Jiang. The pain made his thoughts even more chaotic. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. As soon as Major Jiang came over, He asked where the woman who recorded the video had gone. Beside that woman, there was indeed a man and two little boys who looked like they were not to be trifled with. Could it be that man was the boss they were talking about? Secretary Lu made wild guesses. Young Elle looked at him coldly. The female lawyer you said didn't know what was good for her is our boss. Secretary Lu was stunned and felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. He recalled the order he had just given, Inspector Zhang's attitude towards this person, and the 6 sports cars they drove, and the assault rifles they raised. He suddenly realized that he might have made an unprecedented mistake, because he had investigated the other party's check-in, and found that it was just an ordinary inn. He determined that the other party was a lousy reporter with no background. She wanted to expose something, so she pretended to be a lawyer in front of them. But now, who could make Major Jiang personally take action? When Secretary Lu thought of this, all the color on his face seemed to have been drained, and he was extremely pale. Could it be that they had offended someone they shouldn't have offended? Misunderstanding. This is all a misunderstanding. Secretary Lu's forehead was dripping with cold sweat as he tried to explain. The young man raised his eyebrows, but his expression didn't change. The video was already out, but the signal was cut off. Do you think the people from the Tang sect are fools? Will they believe what you're saying now? Tang sect. These 2 words were like a flash of lightning, shattering the only hope in Secretary Lu's heart. He asked people to surround and beat up Tang. The people from the Tang sect. The young man didn't talk to him anymore. He grabbed the person with his left hand and pressed the gun down with his right hand. I'll ask you one last time, where are the boss and little boss? Secretary Lu looked at the black muzzle and was so scared that he almost peed. His fingers trembled as he pointed in the direction of the conference room. There. Bang! Without thinking, Old A kicked the door of the conference room open, and the few of them quickly cut in. The young man was still dragging Secretary Lu. CEO Wang, who was standing with his back against the door, thought that the people who had barged in were his helpers. He said generously to Beligaju, who was gradually approaching him. Don't think that you can play hero here just because you're a little better. Let me tell you, we have people and backgrounds. As he spoke, he waved his hand, as if to signal the people behind him to attack together. But after waiting for a long time, there was no movement behind him. There was only Beligage's thin lips curled up, revealing an incomparably mocking smile. Hellion Vivian also laughed. She leaned against His Highness, raised her eyebrows, and said to the person in charge, "If I were you, I would want to see who is behind this before giving orders." CEO Wang paused and immediately looked behind him. Facing him was a submachine gun. Then, Secretary Lu fell to the ground. What was going on? Although CEO Wang was used to being unreasonable and killing people, he had never seen a real gun. When the gun pointed at him, his legs immediately went weak. But he didn't expect that the most painful thing was not being pointed at by a gun. But what happened next was the actions of the man who he thought wouldn't make a move. His Highness's posture when beating people was as beautiful as ever. With a stretch of his hand, the entire conference room was filled with the sound of bones breaking. With that kind of sound, even Inspector Jiang felt pain when he heard it, let alone President Wang, who was a fatty, couldn't bear it. But when His Highness beat people up, he would let them choose. Do you prefer your left leg or your right leg? CEO Wang said his left leg, so he broke his left leg. CEO Wang held his left leg in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to say his right leg anymore. His Highness simply broke his arm and watched him struggle on the ground. He only stopped when he had one last breath. Then, he took out a pure white handkerchief from his pocket, gently wiped his hand, and casually threw it aside. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up. He was full of nobility, and his smile was incomparably elegant. I said, I don't like to be threatened. Chapter 939. CEO Wang could no longer speak. At that moment, he would rather die than be in such pain. A few rough men stood in a row at the side and watched this scene. They silently looked up at the sky. As expected, they had a very high estimation of danger. When they first saw this man, they felt that he was not to be trifled with. Hence, They were very smart not to make a fool of themselves in front of him. However, although they had expected this man to be very ruthless, they had never thought that he would be so ruthless. Such a beating was more painful than taking someone's life. How did their boss sleep with him? This beauty looked handsome, but he was prickly to the touch. A few very curious rough men whispered this question in Helene Vivian's ear. Helene Vivian raised her eyebrows and said, "Can't you see such an obvious answer? What he covets is my beauty." The rough men. This was really not too obvious. After all, the other party was the one who was truly beautiful. Wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. Helene Vivian frowned. Why am I the one who slept with him? It sounds like I forced him. The rough men exclaimed, "It's been so long. Why did you only realize the other layer of meaning behind this? It's just a matter of time. Do you understand?" Helene Vivian seriously educated her subordinates. "I never force people. I chased him down." The rough men chuckled. "As long as you're happy. A woman chasing a man. As a domineering CEO and an arms tycoon, should I wait to be chased?" Helene Vivian reached out and patted the rough men on their shoulders. "Do you know why you don't have a girlfriend now? You don't even have the skill to chase people. Don't say that you're a member of the Ghost in the future." The rough men felt like they had been shot in the knee. How could they break through? Indeed, they should activate this skill. But the key was their boss. You're a woman. Why would you activate the skill of a domineering CEO and an arms tycoon? In those novels you read, which domineering CEO is a woman? Tell me. If you tell me, I promise I won't beat that author to death. Helene Weiwei looked at the few rough men who were as sad as withered cucumbers and felt that her counterattack was awesome. After she finished speaking, she walked in front of Bailey Jiaju with an expression that said, "This man is under my protection." Qingchen had already stretched out her hand to support her forehead. She did not want to look at Vivian, who was still confused about her position. Bailey Shangxia felt more and more that his mother's valiance came from the inside out. Yes, very valiant. Baligaju, on the other hand, was very satisfied with his captive phoenix's knowledge in certain aspects. Looking at Helene Vivian leaning over, he only felt that it was cute. It was like a little fox that had recognized its master. How could it not be cute? Then he leisurely glanced at the few burly men. The look in his eyes was very obvious. He was warning them not to say anything that they shouldn't say. Once again, the rough men felt that if their boss fell into the hands of such a man, there would be nothing left of her. However, Secretary Liu, who had watched from the beginning to the end, was so scared that his fingers trembled a lot. On the ground, CEO Wang stretched out his hand, blood bubbling out of his mouth. Secretary Liu. At this time, Secretary Liu did not dare to get close to him. He raised his head and looked at Inspector Jiang. "Major, I am not familiar with this person at all. I really did not know that he would be so brazen." "Xiao, you said you didn't know?" Before Secretary Liu could finish his words, Helene Weiwei's voice slowly interrupted him. "Then why didn't the auxiliary police officers stationed outside rush in when they heard the commotion? Instead, they used something to block the door. It doesn't seem like you don't know about this. It seems like you and Director Wang want to surround and silence me, Director Wang, since I know about this." After saying that, Helene Vivian opened her left hand. Elle skillfully placed one of the guns in her palm. Helene Vivian walked towards Secretary Liu and pressed the muzzle of the gun against his arm. "Why don't we play a game? Which hand do you like?" Secretary Liu heard that and collapsed. Cold sweat kept flowing down his body. Other than fear, there was only fear. Helene Vivian immediately narrowed her eyes. "It seems that this conference room has existed for a long time. I am definitely not the first victim. Now let me ask you, did you kill the missing female university student? If your answer satisfies me, I may not fire this gun. Okay, tell me, why did you kill that female university student? Where is her body now?" Secretary Liu knew that he could not hide this matter anymore. The first thing he thought of was to get rid of his crime. "No, I didn't kill her. I was only in charge of communication. That female university student found that there was a problem here and wanted to report it to the higher-ups. Recently, the higher-ups have been very strict. The secretary's work is not allowed to make mistakes. CEO Wang also wanted to continue with his business, so he wanted to teach that female university student a lesson. Later, CEO Wang made a mistake. He probably saw that the female university student was good-looking, so he overdid it. He also wanted to give that female university student some money to settle this matter. But that female university student was not willing to do it no matter what. She even wanted to expose this scandal. CEO Wang simply did not stop and killed that female university student. It sounds like it's all CEO Wang's fault. Hellion Vivian tilted her head and smiled. The gun handle was pressed against his face. Secretary Liu, do you think that my IQ is especially low? That I will believe whatever you say, huh? Since you know all these things that CEO Wang dares to do, why didn't you do anything? Is CEO Wang the only one responsible for this matter? I will say it one last time. I want to hear the truth. If you can't tell me the truth, I have 100 ways to make you regret meeting me. Secretary Liu was already regretting it now. The pain of having a gun pointed at his body could not be described with words. Fear made him completely collapse. All of this was my boss's intention. Because he has to return to the capital during this period of time. He has to do something. If there is even a little bit of negative news, it will lead to a strict investigation. Moreover, what CEO Wang has done can't be undone. We can only think of a way to make that female university student completely shut up and pretend that she is missing. If a relative comes to ask, we can say that the girl was wearing revealing clothes and went out alone, which is why she was harmed. When CEO Wang caught that female university student, he claimed to be her friend, so this method will definitely work. Hearing this, Hellion Vivian's eyes became even colder. People like you are worse than vermin. After saying that, she put away the gun in her hand and looked up at Inspector Jiang. We want to thoroughly investigate this matter. Young Master Tang personally gave the order, and your garrison troops will cooperate. Anyone who wants to fish out Secretary Liu, and that person will be taken away. Now let's go find that person. Chapter 940. In fact, many years ago, they didn't know how to deal with the internal affairs of the mainland. They only followed young Master Tang to carry out protection missions. Every time they did a mission, everyone knew that they were in trouble. They were like people who wandered on the edge of life and death. In order to catch a drug lord, they would lurk in the grass for 3 days and 3 nights. If they were not careful, they would still be shot. Even young Master Tang had been injured before. That person didn't need to be at the front line at all. But he was the one who told them the reason why they would pick up guns to kill people. It was so that the people they loved and the people who loved them wouldn't have to worry about being hurt one day. All the dirty things in the world would be solved by them. And those people only needed to live a carefree life. But the current situation had already touched the bottom line of the Tang sect. Therefore, he didn't care about what the chain behind this was. When young Master Tang received Hellion Vivian's call, he only said one word. Catch. Hellion Weiwei was also not long-winded. With the momentum of a sudden clap of thunder, she led everyone directly to the location of a certain person. In fact, a certain person who still didn't know what had happened was still trying to bribe some people to help him suppress the matter. But at this moment, someone on the internet exposed a big piece of news. It was the smiling face of a missing female university student left behind in the world. Why did this person go missing? Monkey's technology wasn't good enough. Hellion Vivian had originally planned to fight head-on. However, young Master Tang was still the same as before. He was always decisive and handsome. Leave this matter to me. No matter how rich or powerful the other party is, as long as he crosses the line, I will find a way to punish him. You guys are only responsible for what you have to do. 3 minutes. Young Master Tang personally took over. 6 computers operated at the same time. He didn't care how big the business deal he was talking about was. What he wanted to do was to restore as much of the incident as possible. Although Monkey was powerful, he was really a few levels lower than young Master Tang. This person, who was once known as an internet prodigy, directly cracked all the defense systems. He used the computer's memory hard disk to search, and found the last image of the female university student. It was that she was jointly pushing her with the tour guide and a certain CEO Wang. This video was enough for Hellion Vivian to fight a beautiful battle. A certain person had just discussed the process and asked his subordinates to do it. Who would have thought that the answer he received was, "Not a single marketing account will clear his name." How could this be? Isn't it possible to control marketing accounts with money? All the marketing accounts, control my ass. It was true that they loved money, but they still had a conscience. If he didn't explain clearly what was going on with the video, don't even think about overturning this. A certain person realized that something was wrong, but his sense of superiority didn't make him feel that it was too serious. After all, this kind of thing was also reported when people went missing. There would always be a day when it was left unsettled. People wouldn't always pay attention to this matter, but he was afraid that it would really affect his future. A certain person's mood had never been as bad as it was now. He called the other two people over to discuss how to deal with such an emergency. If it really didn't work out, they would spend a lot of money. Just as they sat down and were about to discuss matters, the door of the conference room was kicked open. Hellion Weiwei slowly paced forward. Following behind her were 7 rough men in neat rows, as well as a certain His Highness who looked like a noble, as well as 2 little ones. A certain person frowned and shouted in a low voice, "Who allowed you to come in?" Hellion Vivian usually didn't talk nonsense with people. She moved and pressed that person on the table with one hand. "Lower your voice. I don't like noise. Do you know who I am? How dare you hit me?" A certain person turned his head to the side angrily and looked at Inspector Jiang. "Major Jiang, I've always respected you, but this doesn't mean that you have the right to do anything to me. My rank is higher than yours. You'd better ask your subordinates to let go. Otherwise, if there's a conflict, it won't be easy to explain to anyone." Inspector Jiang smiled. "Don't worry. There's no need to explain this matter. Don't you recognize who she is?" A certain person narrowed his eyes and finally saw the truth of Hellion Vivian. She was clearly a lousy reporter disguised as a tourist. Why was she here? Shouldn't Secretary Liu have her under control already? "Are you looking for someone to run errands for you?" Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and kindly answered for him. "He's outside now. He's already been beaten to a pulp." The rest immediately stood up. "Jiang, are you kidding? Quickly ask this woman to let go. Everyone, it's a pity that I'm not in charge of this operation this time. It's this woman you're talking about." Inspector Jiang shrugged. "By the way, let me tell you, she's not a reporter. She's the boss of the Ghost Organization." "Oh, you might not know about the Ghost Organization, but you must have heard of the other one. She's one of the 12 shadows of the Tang sect. You should be clear now. Whether she lets go or not is really not up to me." Hearing the words Tang sect, the person who wanted to use his identity to suppress her was completely stunned. He quickly explained, "There's a misunderstanding. There must be a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Hellion Vivian lowered her voice. "Such a big thing happened. And you want to use the word misunderstanding to cover it up? Do you really think that no one will care about you?" With that said, Hellion Vivian dragged the person and pushed him to Old A. "Take him away." This series of actions was too fast. It was so fast that before anyone could react, a line was completely cut off. A certain person who was in a daze didn't have any of his previous arrogance. He only pulled Hellion Vivian and kept explaining, but it was useless. The truth was very clear. No matter how much he regretted it, only death awaited him. Hellion Vivian personally handed the person to young Master Tang. The person still looked like he was in a military uniform. He held a thin and long cigarette in his fingers. He looked a little lazy, but more than that, his back was straight. "This matter won't end just because the person was arrested," Hellion Vivian murmured in a low voice. Young Master Tang looked at her and suddenly smiled. "Of course, I said that you do what you should do, and I'll do what I should do." Beligaju didn't really want to see Hellion Vivian and young Master Tang alone, because this human's willpower was too strong. Even the surrounding darkness couldn't affect him. It was obvious that this person's heart was completely black, and he had killed countless people. However, Bailey Jiaju actually saw something similar to sunlight in his heart. Beligaju's divine sense told him that it was given to him by someone. Just like the reason why he was who he was now, and not a demon who only knew how to kill people, was also because of Hellion Vivian's existence. Hellion Vivian didn't understand the meaning of young Master Tang's words at first, until she saw a short interview before she left Li City. It was young Master Tang. That person stood openly under the beam of light, his eyes looking straight at the camera. He was tall and slender, and every word was clear. Chapter 941. Every time something happens, we remind the women around us how to prevent this kind of thing from happening when they go out at night or travel. But what I want to say is that violence and injustice should be stopped immediately. If you are alone at that time, don't walk away. Call on others to stop it with you. If you are 2 or more people, please think of a way to stop it. Here, I don't want to talk about how girls should protect themselves, because in my family, protecting girls should be done by men. As for other aspects, I can also respond here. I love this land, and the woman I love is here. She told me how warm it is here. I can't guarantee that I can be by her side 24 hours a day, so I will do my best to sweep away all the darkness. No matter who the other party is or how strong their background is, as long as they do something wrong, I will let them get the punishment they deserve. As he said this, the sun just set behind young Master Tang. The afterglow shone on his handsome military uniform, and it was dazzling. Hellion Vivian remembered a long time ago, the little boy who looked at her without saying a word in Chinatown. It had always been like this. Even if this person's hands were stained with blood, he didn't look dirty. Instead, he seemed to emit light. Perhaps this was young Master Tang. Hellion Vivian wanted to look at the video again, but her eyes were blocked by someone. It was Beligage's hand. It was slender and white, without a trace of blood. He whispered in her ear. Do you know how long you've been looking at him? 5 minutes. In these 5 minutes, I said 3 words to you, but you didn't respond. Hellion Vivian wanted to explain, but her body was suddenly pulled into Beligage's arms. He was very strong, as if he wanted to integrate her into his bones and blood. Don't say anything that makes me unhappy. It will only make me want to lock you up. All the breath Hellion Vivian breathed in was a man's, but she still had to make it clear. I just think what young Master Tang said is very reasonable. I don't mean anything else. You absolutely can't talk about young Marshal Tang in front of His Highness. He'll get jealous, definitely. Do you think I will believe you? Beligage looked at her and raised his eyebrows. Hellion Vivian looked serious. You have to believe me. How can the most basic trust between people not exist? Beligage really cared. This person would never understand that he had always wanted everything from her. Even if it was just for a few minutes, he would never allow her to linger on anyone, let alone look at another man with such a worshipful expression. It's easy for me to believe you. Beligage's eyes darkened, and he pulled her into his arms. When we go back, you take the initiative. Hellion Vivian. They were clearly talking about trust, so why did they talk about who took the initiative? Well, if it's not up to standard, I'll take the initiative. You should know what the consequences are if I take the initiative. Beligage was still smiling, and he looked very, very gentle. Hellion Vivian still saw other emotions in his eyes, so she laughed as well. She reached out and pinched Beligage's face. Hey, you're obviously jealous. Besides, young Master Tang has his little childhood sweetheart. Why are you even jealous of a married man? Student Hellion Weiwei. What we're talking about now is the problem of you neglecting me. Bailey Jiaju's voice was very clear and noble as he said slowly. Do I need to be jealous of anyone? Hellion Vivian. Then what are you doing now? Tell me. The 2 little ones looked at each other, and tacitly chose the car driven by the official, temporarily distancing themselves from their imperial father. Their imperial mother didn't notice it just now, but they saw with their own eyes that when their imperial mother was watching the video, the flowers and trees around a certain someone withered in an instant. It was better to avoid such an imperial father. Beligage didn't continue the discussion with Hellion Vivian, and pulled her into the prepared sports car. If you think that His Highness is driving, you're wrong. The one driving was Hellion Vivian, and His Highness sat leisurely in the front passenger seat as usual. directing Helly and Vivian how to take the route. They didn't fly away directly, but went to Lee City. The reason was because when they just got off the plane, Helly and Vivian sighed. It was a pity to come to Lee City and not go to Lee City. Baligaju canceled all his itineraries on the same day and booked a hotel. Although he wanted to go back early, lock up the certain someone who belonged to him, and have her without any scruples. However, whatever Helly and Vivian wanted to do, His Highness would always let her do it. Even though Baligaju didn't like the sun very much, the ultraviolet rays in Lee City were very strong, especially in the afternoon. His Highness still allowed Helly and Vivian to support him, and looked at the old streets of Lee City with shining eyes. She looked like a small animal. His Highness curved his thin lips, hugged her, and kissed Helly and Vivian's hair. That action was very light, so light that Helly and Vivian, who was only focused on eating, didn't notice it, but it was seen by the people around them. He must love his girlfriend very much. Wow! That look in his eyes just now, it was so affectionate that I was drunk. Helly and Vivian was indeed slower in some aspects, but she could clearly sense that His Highness didn't like the sun, so she wanted to go back to the hotel after shopping for a while. Baligaju raised his eyebrows. Don't you like it? Why are we going back? You're afraid of the sun. Helly and Vivian pulled him forward, and they walked to a cool place. As smart as she was, she quickly realized something. Although His Highness didn't stay in the sun much in the past, it wasn't to the point where he wasn't used to being under the sun. Now, he frowned as soon as the sun came out. Could it have something to do with him tearing apart time and space? In the end, it was all for her. Helly and Vivian paused for a moment, and tightened her grip on the big hand in her hand. Baligaju obviously knew what was wrong with the person he was keeping in captivity, but His Highness liked it when she was worried about him. In this case, she should be able to do it for one more day. The man with the thin lips was like a blooming datura flower, with a charming black-bellied heart. After returning to the hotel, the more Helly and Vivian thought about it, the more she felt that His Highness needed to be taken care of. So she did all the work of peeling oranges. And it wasn't an exaggeration to say that. In the past, Helly and Vivian was only ordered to carry the luggage, but now, Helly and Vivian took the initiative to carry the luggage, and even helped His Highness put the chopsticks on the bowl. Bailey Shangxia looked at the scene, lowered his voice and said to his father, "Did you do something again to deliberately make Mother misunderstand?" Chapter 942. Baligaju wiped his thin lips with a smile. "I'm just acting like I'm hiding from the sun. What kind of misunderstanding is this? I don't like the sun to begin with." Bailey Shangxia chuckled. "Your body isn't that weak yet, right?" He knew that his father had suffered a severe backlash, but to his father, even if it was a backlash, he could still destroy the world. Why would he be unable to withstand a little bit of sunlight? He could endure it, but demons didn't feel pain. It was obvious that he was doing it on purpose, making it seem like he was in a very serious condition. How shameless. The little one's face became even more cool and soft. He held a small bowl and seriously fed little Qingchen. Anyway, no one in the world could stop his father from acting. He realized that ever since he found his mother, his father's level of shamelessness had increased by leaps and bounds. In the past, although his father was full of black water, he wasn't interested in anything. He was just a little more brutal. However, it was different when it came to his mother. He pretended to be weak 24 hours a day, and that was really enough. Baligaju never cared about how his little demon looked at him. He was a demon, and playing tricks and scheming were his interests. However, he knew that a certain little phoenix didn't like him killing people. Therefore, his physiological needs were completely solved by a certain someone. Since that was the case, of course, he had to think of a way to make a certain someone lie down willingly. He liked it when she took the initiative. Her face was always red, and that would only make him want to bully her more. Bailey Jiaju looked at the figure that was swaying back and forth in front of him. He stroked his thin lips and smiled. Lee City was a good place. The fragrance of flowers permeated everywhere, and the smell of food was quietly fermenting inside. The two little ones went to bed early. Bailey Shangxia helped little Qingchen wash her hair and blow-dry her hair. The two of them changed into little pajamas and sat on the ground to play Ghost Messenger. That's right, they were playing Ghost Messenger. Even the surrounding ghosts were so frightened that they began to tremble. The ghost messengers were put on wigs and lipstick. They were crying and just wanted to go back to hell as soon as possible. These two little devils were the bane of their existence. Hellion Vivian saw that Dabao and Air Bao were having fun, so she decided to take His Highness out for a walk. He couldn't go out during the day, but it shouldn't be a problem for him to go out at night. Hellion Vivian ate until she was full at night. Basically, everything that His Highness didn't eat would be picked out and eliminated by Hellion Vivian. As they walked, Baligaju did not forget to stretch out a hand to rub the belly of the person in his arms. Hellion Vivian leaned into his arms with a smile and held his other hand. She looked at the snacks along the way with interest. However, Baligaju wouldn't buy it for her. He didn't want her to roll around in bed after eating. This one looks good. It's spicy and so is that one. Hellion Vivian had 3 hobbies in her life. First money, second appearance, and third food. Now that she was in the ancient city, she wanted to eat whatever she saw. Baligaju pulled her back and said in a faint voice, "Aren't you on a diet?" Speaking of the matter of losing weight, it was after arriving at Lee City today. After Wei Wei saw a girl from the south, she made up her mind. Different from the northern girls, the southern girls all looked petite and gentle. Wei Wei looked at her own height and decided to control her appetite. This made Baligaju, who was happy to feed a certain person, frown. However, His Highness was smart. He didn't say anything and kept tempting her with delicious food. In the end, not only did Hellion Vivian eat more than usual, she even ate half a bowl of rice more than usual. Moreover, Hellion Vivian still didn't notice His Highness's thoughts. When she heard Baligaju's reminder, she immediately stopped drooling and said to Baligaju, "That's right. You have to supervise me like this in the future." Bailey Jiaju's lips curved into a half-smile as he hugged the person in his arms and kissed her forehead. He thought to himself, she's my pet, so of course I'm the one who should feed her. How can she casually eat these random things outside? His Highness had always been a person with a strong desire to control. However, his desire to control was covered up by his black-bellied methods. Even if Hellion Vivian found out, she wouldn't say anything. Anyway, as long as His Highness was happy, he could raise her however he wanted. However, in reality, Hellion Vivian wasn't fat at all. Although she looked a bit taller than southern girls, her figure was exquisite. She had long legs and a slim waist. Coupled with her striking softness, this only made her even more stunning when she wore the ethnic long dress. Hellion Wei Wei's appearance had never been that of the girl next door type, let alone pure and innocent. Her beauty was like a spider lily blooming in the dark, like a raging fire in full swing. When outsiders saw her, they might think that she was a bad woman. As a result, many people said that it was impossible for the emperor to truly like the phoenix. It was because she didn't have the appearance of a good girl. When this woman was holding a scimitar, she made people feel that she was bloodless and heartless. When she was chanting, she didn't have a kind attitude at all. Instead, she was lazy, unlike other people who were very clean. That was why people in the Buddhist world said that even though she was noble and beautiful, she would never be treated with sincerity by men. They thought that it was the same for emperor, but they never thought that Baligaju liked this kind of Hellion Vivian. His most beautiful phoenix could always easily make him want to own her and make her belong only to him. However, before Baligaju did so, Hellion Vivian raised her head, and her eyes were clear. "Let's sign a new contract." Baligaju was shocked and looked up at her. "You want to sell your soul to me? When tearing space and time, the contract effect should be affected. Otherwise, why didn't you find me immediately?" Hellion Wei Wei analyzed as she said, "After a demon signs an exclusive contract, he will become invincible. Coincidentally, I can help you recover from the backlash that you suffered." So she didn't care at all about selling her soul to the demon? Baligaju reached out and hugged the person in front of him tightly. In the face of such a proposal, Baligaju would not refuse. A long time ago, he had thought countless times about pulling this person into the darkness and being with him forever. But every time, he was reluctant to do so. Now, he could finally have her completely. Of course, Beligaju wouldn't hesitate. It was just a contract, not a one-sided sale. But on the basis of this, the demon's submission to the contractor was added. It meant that in this relationship, the real master became Hellion Vivian. She had given her soul to him, but he had given everything to her. Chapter 943. With such a shameless father, Bailey Shangxia still felt very tired. For the time being, he didn't have to go against his father. He had to accumulate strength for revenge, and his younger brother was also hungry. As a good elder brother, Bailey Shangxia still placed his younger brother first. The two little ones walked in and looked at the half-asleep Hellion Vivian for a while. Then, they were instructed by their father to pack their small suitcases. Logically speaking, shouldn't this kind of thing be done by adults? The two little ones questioned their father. No wonder Imperial Mother has always said that there's a problem with your education method. Beligaju sat on the bench with his legs slightly crossed. He glanced at the two little mushrooms indifferently and said in a very slow tone, "Father is training your ability to do things by yourself. What's wrong with that? Then why did you let us pack your clothes?" Qingchen ran back and forth between the two rooms, holding a certain highness's suit in her hands. Her cheeks were puffy and cute. Beligaju said very slowly, "This is to let you know what it means to respect the old and love the young." The two onlooking ghost messengers. The daily life of the big devil and the little devil. They felt that the big devil had already reached a certain level of shamelessness. After the two little ones finished packing, Qingchen wore a small sun hat. The hat was worn upside down, and the hair inside stood up. She looked handsome and cute. Bailey Shangxia's little face was covered with a pair of big sunglasses. He was dragging a small suitcase in his hand, and the few black diamond earrings on his ears made him look like a little vampire. He was very cool. Hellion Vivian finally didn't feel so tired. After waking up, she saw that her luggage had been packed. Even her clothes were put on by a certain highness. She only needed to wash her face and then leave. Probably because he was worried that she would be tired. This time, even the suitcase was pulled by a certain highness. He didn't forget to hold Qingchen in his left hand. Bailey Shangxia followed behind him, pulling his small suitcase coolly. The three of them even looked very cool when they walked. This time, they didn't take a private plane back, but the first-class cabin booked by Vivian. After all, flying back and forth in a private plane didn't have the mood to play. It was more interesting to wait for the plane with everyone and check in. It was indeed interesting because there were two little ones walking around in the airport. Others didn't know what they were doing because they couldn't see the rope in their hands. Only the undead spirits inside were so scared that they hid and didn't dare to show their faces. Coincidentally, there was a new ghost messenger who was going to take office today. The old ghost messenger was still walking in front swaggering, and he said to the person behind him in an imposing manner, "This airport is our territory. This is the most leisurely place. The safety measures are good, and very few people die. It's unlike the people in charge of the hospital, who have to lead people down every day. Here, we only need to eat a stick of incense, and we won't see any powerful people for a year and a half." Before it could finish its sentence, the newly appointed Reaper saw its boss hide in a corner with a whoosh. It was so fast that it was completely stunned. Of course, the old ghost messenger wouldn't leave the new ghost messenger alone. He reached out and dragged his disciple to the corner of the wall to hide with a pile of undead spirits to disguise himself. "Boss, what's wrong?" The new ghost messenger was a little confused, but he also knew that with their noble identities, how could they hide with a group of undead spirits? The old ghost messenger didn't care who he was hiding with. He only cared about why the little devil and the big devil appeared in the airport at the same time. "Don't stretch your neck, you'll be taken away." The old ghost messenger lowered his voice. "Didn't you see what the little devil is holding in his hand?" The new ghost messenger took a closer look and was completely enraged. He jumped out and blocked the path of the two little ones. His imposing manner was very strong. He thought that he must perform well in front of his boss. "How dare you humans? You dare to slip away from the ghost messenger. The old ghost messenger. Damn it. Why did he bring a retard out? The old ghost messenger could clearly see Bailey Shangxia's pair of red eyes light up evilly, meaning nothing more than to say, "Look, a new toy has arrived." Thus, in less than a minute, the two little ones' toys turned from 2 to 4. Seeing that they were about to board the plane, Qingchen raised her little finger and counted. Then, she tied the rope and pulled the 4 ghost messengers swaying behind her brother. The new ghost messenger was stunned. He turned his head and asked the old ghost, "Boss, why is a human child so strong? You've never told me that there are people in the human world who like to catch ghost messengers as toys. You must have not seen how powerful we are, right?" The old ghost messenger didn't want to talk anymore. The feeling of being pulled along was really not a good feeling. The other 2 ghost messengers were originally waiting for their colleague to inform the little king of hell, but now it seemed that their colleague was reliable. But the new colleague was not. The whole army was dead. In the future, when they recruit ghost messengers, they must be more careful. They must not accept those who are not smart. The boarding line was very long. Bailey Shangxia was afraid that Qingchen would be bumped into. So he handed his small luggage to Baligaju and seriously carried the little one, who was only a head shorter than him, looking very cool. Helly and Vivian and the others were in first class, so under normal circumstances, they were the first to board the plane, so there was no need to cut the queue. However, just as a bespectacled man in front was about to take a step forward, a foreigner jumped out and blocked his path. The foreigner seemed to have drunk, but not much, but his expression was fierce. He looked at the bespectacled man with contempt, and took the lead to walk into the passageway with his small suitcase. No matter where it was, this kind of behavior would not be liked. Moreover, when he entered, the foreigner even bumped into the bespectacled man intentionally or unintentionally, which was very rude. However, this small matter did not attract everyone's attention. Perhaps they did, but because that person was a foreigner, they vaguely passed by. Helly and Vivian took a step forward and held the bag that the bespectacled man had dropped. Her voice was very calm. "Are you okay?" The bespectacled man shook his head and quickly said, "Thank you." He originally thought that it would be a small interlude, but when he boarded the plane, the foreigner seemed to be on the phone. His voice was very loud, and his anger was burning. In the end, he cursed in a low voice and hung up the phone. When he saw the bespectacled man dragging his luggage over, he had that contemptuous and disdainful expression again. With malice, he stood there with his long legs and looked at Helly and Vivian and the others. No, it should be said that he looked at everyone who walked in, as if he was looking at a pile of trash. Chapter 944. Initially, nothing much happened. However, half an hour after the plane took off, the conflict escalated. Bailey Shangxia twisted his little body coolly and reached out to rub Qingchen's little ears. The 4 reapers were chained to their seats in a row. No one could see them. It was quite miserable. The stewardess in uniform began to deliver drinks to the passengers. When she walked to the foreigner's seat, she politely asked him in broken English if he wanted to eat. The foreigner was playing on his computer and waved his hand to refuse. On the other hand, the bespectacled young man at the side was a little hungry. He ordered a bowl of beef noodles. Then, he opened the folding table behind the foreigner's seat and placed the tray on the table. He held his chopsticks, but because the foreigner in front of him had placed the back of the chair, he felt very uncomfortable eating. He couldn't pick up the noodles with his chopsticks and couldn't move his mouth. When the beautiful stewardess saw this, she immediately suggested to the foreigner in a friendly manner that because the passengers in the back row were eating, please straighten the back of the chair for convenience. Unexpectedly, this foreigner waved his hand violently and ignored the stewardess. He also didn't adjust the back of the chair. The beautiful stewardess was a little stunned. She seemed to be wondering if she didn't express herself clearly. She repeated her words again. "I said no. Do you understand?" The foreigner's voice was exceptionally loud, and his appearance was extremely arrogant. Helly and Vivian looked at this scene and slowly narrowed her eyes. She spoke in fluent English. "Sir, Although the international aviation regulations do not state that you must straighten the back of the chair when eating in the plane, for the sake of the people around you, can you please? This was Helene Vivian's very polite attitude. When dealing with outsiders, she had always been polite before resorting to force. Although her eyes had turned cold because of this foreigner's attitude, after all, this was Wuxia, not the foreigner's territory. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. The foreigner seemed to have been ignited. He glared fiercely at Helene Vivian. If you want to argue with me about this, call the person in charge here. Otherwise, don't poke your nose into other people's business. His voice went up another level. The stewardess was a little frightened. She pressed Helene Vivian's hand with both hands and said, "It's okay. There's no need to make such a big fuss." Then he politely apologized to the bespectacled young man. "I'm very sorry, we didn't let you enjoy the service you deserve. Your meal difficulty is due to our work." Before she could finish, the foreigner stretched out his right arm and 2 fingers, beckoning the stewardess over. Then he said to the stewardess in English, "Can you be sure that this person understands what I just said? I can put down the back of the chair whenever I want. That's my business. There's no law that says I have to do that. Go, translate for that person, and make sure he understands." "I understand, and I heard it very clearly." Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes at him. "Your attitude is very rude. I can sue you at any time. Come at me if you have the guts. Let's see what you can do." His voice was very loud. It was so loud that the stewardess could only say to Helene Vivian, "Forget it, forget it. This kind of small matter will pass after a while. After all, we're on a plane. Forget it." Helene Vivian could see that the stewardess was forcing a smile. She had said it many times. So many times that Helene Vivian could sense the grievance hidden in it. Helene Vivian had been on so many planes, domestic and overseas, and had carried out so many missions. The foreigners she met were warm and polite, but this one did not treat the Chinese as human beings. Perhaps he had the law and reason, but his attitude made Helene Vivian very clear that he looked down on her, the bespectacled young man, and even the stewardess. They were here to earn the Chinese's money. Since they were here to earn our money, they were not our masters. Did we treat them so well that they did not know what respect and politeness were? Or did they not take the Chinese seriously from the beginning? Their actions were so exaggerated that it was unbearable. If the same thing happened to the Chinese, wouldn't they be criticized by countless people for being uneducated? In reality, who was the one who was truly uneducated and even rude? This time, Helene Weiwei was really angry. Although she did not show anything on the surface, the coldness in her eyes made the 2 little ones look at her one after another. However, the person they saw was not Helene Vivian, but Beligaju. After all, with their father's personality, they felt that he would not tolerate anyone who made their mother unhappy in front of him. The strange thing was, why didn't their father do anything? Bailey Shangxia raised his head again and glanced at Beligaju. His thin lips were slightly raised, and he did not look angry at all. There was a business magazine spread out on his lap. If he was not looking at this scene with his eyes, people would probably mistakenly think that he did not hear the noise at all. But in fact, he did hear it, and his fingers were tapping on the magazine. The devil's breath mixed with it made people confused. Bailey Shangxia sat a little closer and lowered his voice. "Dad, don't tell me that you have become kind now?" "Dad?" Beligaju seemed to be thinking about this name. First, he rubbed his thin lips with his fingers, then reached out and patted his son's head as if he was patting a ball. "Bailey Shangxia, how many times have I told you not to have this kind of illusion? Believe in your mother. She can solve this kind of small matter by herself." Bailey Shangxia raised his small eyebrows and smiled wickedly. "I believe in my mother, but I don't believe in you. It was not normal to be so honest. As a gentleman, even if I can't stand some stupid humans, I have to give my partner the right to vent her anger." Bailey Jiaju wiped his slender and clean fingers. The side of his face made him look like a vampire, noble to the point of elegance, but with a lowered head of viciousness. "Sit back down obediently. This seat belongs to your mother." Bailey Shangxia. Helene Vivian did have a way to vent her anger. She closed her eyes and kept thinking about why the other party was so arrogant. It was because the Chinese had always adhered to the principle of harmony. This principle was not wrong. But if the other party thought that their kindness was weakness, then they had to know that their friendliness did not mean that they were cowards. As a lawyer, Hellion Vivian was very clear that foreigners in the mainland were different from Chinese people in the mainland. They did not need to abide by Chinese laws, they only needed to abide by international laws. It was probably because of this that some scumbags were so unrestrained in China. Chapter 945. They boasted that they were superior to others, and the foreigner on the plane was a typical example. The wheels of the plane slid across the ground and shook for a while. When the plane stabilized, Hellion Vivian's eyes became colder. It was not because of anything else, but because the foreigner picked up a phone call as soon as they landed on the ground. His tone was very unpleasant. Hellion Weiwei knew that there were many reasons why some foreigners looked down on Chinese people. Some even joked in private, saying that Chinese women were easy to get. As long as they showed their foreign faces, they would be able to get everything done. They did not even have to put in any effort, and those women would come to them to strike up a conversation. No matter what a foreigner looked like, even if he was bald and ugly, there were only Wuxia women around him. Basically, they were all young and beautiful. This situation did exist, but it didn't mean that all Wuxia women were the same. Some girls were kind, upright, independent, and worked hard in the business world with the most professional attitude. They relied on their own strength and hard work. Such girls could be seen in every corner of Wuxia. They might be cashiers in supermarkets, cute girls who were still in school, or department managers who were working overtime in professional clothes. They worked so hard and endured all kinds of pressure, not because they wanted to be looked down upon in their own country. Hellion Vivian listened to the foreigner's phone call. Her fingers moved, and she handed the suitcase to His Highness. The two little ones wanted to ask their mother if she needed help in the fight. They could help, but before they could do anything, they were pulled back by their father. His Highness's posture was as handsome as usual. He held the two little ones by their collars with one hand, and the phone with the other. Although the corners of his mouth were still smiling, it made people feel that he was domineering. Hellion Vivian walked very fast. When she passed by the foreigner, she even brought a gust of wind. When the foreigner saw her coming, his first reaction was to sneer, and then look at her with disdain. Hellion Vivian was not angry. She raised her eyebrows and looked at him with obvious provocation on her face. The foreigner had never been treated like this before. He gave Hellion Vivian the middle finger, and his attitude was very arrogant. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and pulled his hand over. When the foreigner saw this situation, he thought that Hellion Vivian was going to fight with him. He cursed under his breath, and didn't withdraw his ferocious expression. Hellion Vivian turned her face to the side, and an inconspicuous blush appeared on her face. At that moment, Bailey Shangxia felt the deadly murderous aura emanating from his father. He thought that this foreigner would definitely not survive today. Although it was a trap set up by Empress Mother, as long as they touched Empress Mother, no matter what the reason was, there would be no good in the end. Such a commotion naturally attracted the attention of the airport security personnel. The foreigner was still waving his arms. Every move he made was filled with ferocity. However, he knew that he had made a mistake. However, in his opinion, it was impossible for these Wuxia people to discover his mistake. Therefore, he planned to leave in disdain. However, what he didn't expect was that Hellion Vivian flashed in front of the foreigner. She touched her face with her fingers and smiled wickedly. "You want to leave after hitting someone? Didn't you say that you know international law very well? That's good. I also know the rules of international law very well." With that said, Hellion Vivian pressed the earpiece on her ear. "Are the police here? Very good. Let them come in and take this foreigner to court. Yes, I want to sue him." "What should I sue him for? Illegal assault, injury, disfigurement, does that count?" When the foreigner heard Hellion Vivian's words, he was stunned. Just now, she was the one who grabbed his hand and slapped his face. Also, this was called disfigurement. It was just a little red, right? How was this disfigurement? Unfortunately, the person he met was Helian Weiwei. Helian Weiwei's eloquence had the ability to make the police take him away. She said that not only was her face hurt, but she was also scared. She would be afraid to go out on the street in the future. Moreover, this was not an ordinary attack. This foreigner was violent and had to be controlled. The foreigner always thought that Wuxia people were easy to fool. Under normal circumstances, as long as they saw his appearance, they would unconsciously show their inferiority. However, this woman could reverse black and white to such an extent. He desperately wanted to explain in English. However, Helian Vivian directly interrupted him in Chinese. Are you going to deny the fact that you just hit someone? The surrounding people are all watching. Enough. I admit that I did hit someone, but that was you. Since you admit it, there's nothing to say. Helian Vivian turned to the police and said, "You can take him away." The foreigner was held on both sides. He was so angry that his face was distorted. He thought that was the end. However, to his surprise, the woman looked at him with a smile and said a long sentence in English in a low voice. It was difficult for others to understand because there were too many professional words in it. However, as a foreigner, the foreigner understood it very clearly. She said, "You think you can do whatever you want in Wuxia without obeying the laws of Wuxia? Since you think so, I'll send you to the International Court of Justice. It's not my time that you waste. People like you should be most afraid of wasting time, right?" This was the style of every foreigner. He was a senior executive in Wuxia. There were too many things for him to deal with in the company. He had encountered problems in his work these days. If he was involved in legal issues, the company might let him leave because of his low efficiency. Even if he had to pay a lot of money, the foreigner didn't want to be sent back to China because of such a small matter. At this moment, he also understood that he had kicked an iron plate, but it was too late for regrets. When he was dragged away, the woman standing in front of him smiled so obviously. She even deliberately touched her cheek with her finger, as if she was returning the favor. In fact, the foreigner didn't know that this was just the beginning. Bailey Shangxie clearly heard his father's voice on the phone. It was neither high nor low, but it made people feel cold in their bones. "You found it? Then let him know what it means to be slapped in the face. First, stop the cooperation with his company. Tell him the reason for stopping the cooperation is because of the manager of his department." Chapter 946. Why? Because he did something very stupid when he was on the plane. The coldness in Beligage's eyes was incomparably deep. He watched Helian Vivian slowly walk over, said one last sentence and hung up the phone. But it wasn't over yet. His Highness glanced behind him, and immediately, a dark shadow swept in the direction where the foreigner was taken away. Bailey Shangxie crossed his arms in front of his chest. "Dad, didn't you say that you wanted Mother to vent her anger on her own? Now that she's done, it's my turn to do it. Do you have a problem with that?" Bailey Jiaju slowly glanced at his son, who was a troublemaker. Bailey Shangxie said angrily, "Then why don't you let me vent my anger on my brother? You can take the ghost messenger to vent your anger on that foreigner tonight. But don't let your mother find out." Beligaju lowered his voice. She doesn't like to use ghosts to deal with humans. When the two little ones heard this idea, the corners of their mouths immediately curled up. Using ghosts to deal with humans, their father was really too evil. One had to know that killing people wasn't scary, but making people live in fear every day was the scariest. When the time comes, we must scare him until he goes to see a psychiatrist. Little Qingchen sounded like a little gentleman when he spoke, but in fact, he took after his highness in every way. If Helian Vivian heard such an unscrupulous plan of the three of them, she would definitely doubt whether there was something wrong with her education system. His Highness was very happy. With two free laborers, he didn't have to go out and do things himself at night. One had to know that sometimes, Vivian was so smart that he would more or less restrain himself. After all, he didn't like to hug his favorite phoenix with the smell of blood. But even so, when he saw the inconspicuous red mark on Helian Vivian's face, The bloodthirsty feeling in the depths of Beligage's heart continued to surge out. Therefore, after wrapping his arm around Hellion Vivian's waist, His Highness made a new decision to settle the score personally. Hellion Vivian looked at the man's eyes and knew that he was unhappy because of her injury. She felt a chill all over her body, and even after getting into the car driven by the driver, she didn't retreat. Thus, as a domineering president, Hellion Vivian was very obedient. Originally, she had planned to give His Highness a kiss after they got on the car to appease the anger hidden under Bailey Jiaju's elegance. After all, when the other half was in a difficult situation, it was basically, "Don't talk, kiss me" pattern. However, it was obvious that this trick had no effect on His Highness at all, because before Hellion Wei Wei could kiss his cheek, she was pushed away by His Highness with an indifferent expression. Sit properly. How could Hellion Vivian tolerate His Highness rejecting her? She sat down, but she still stole a kiss before sitting down. She was in a very good mood, and even the corners of her mouth curled up. His Highness looked at her and reached out to turn her face to him. Then, Hellion Vivian felt a chill with the scent of sandalwood. It was blood. It was said that the blood of a demon could heal any wound, and could even bring a person back to life. Hellion Vivian was stunned, and she pulled His Highness's hand away. Her heart ached. "You are just a little injured. You can just rub it with medicine. Is there a need to use blood?" Beligaju looked at her with a deep gaze and said in a low voice, "There's a need." After saying that, His Highness picked her up and put her in his arms. Because he was driving a luxury limousine, there was a lot of space in the car. Even if he did these things, it wouldn't affect the man's elegance. He held Hellion Vivian's hand as if he was playing with it, but also as if he was warning her, "You're mine. Other than me, no one can touch you." Hellion Vivian knew His Highness well. Even if it was a wound, he had to be the one to give it to her. However, when she saw the bleeding wrist, Hellion Vivian's heart ached. She held that hand, and held it all the way. Beligaju liked the way she was worried about him. Although it could be cured with a spell, if it made her nervous, he didn't mind acting like a human, and pretending to be in pain. The two little ones watched from the side from the beginning to the end. Qingchen felt that it was hopeless to save her father. His father was too good at pretending, and he knew how to use both the trick of injuring himself to gain sympathy, and the beauty trap. No wonder his mother called herself a domineering CEO. Sigh. He had to be prepared to watch his father act at all times in the future. Bailey Shangxia didn't care about his father from the beginning to the end. Without a doubt, his father did this because he didn't want his mother to be injured again in the future. That was why he used blood to heal her. He could use magic even if he didn't use medicine. He used blood to make his mother keep an eye on him at all times, so that she couldn't be distracted. Sure enough, when they arrived at the car dealership, his father looked like he had lost a lot of blood. His face was very pale, but it didn't affect his handsomeness at all. Hellion Vivian let him lie on her bed. She first treated the wound on his wrist, and then went downstairs to make him red date soup. The two little ones were left behind by Hellion Vivian to take care of their father, but they knew very well that their father didn't need them to take care of him at all. As soon as Hellion Vivian left, Beligaju stood up and dialed the number in his hand. He didn't look weak at all. Instead, layers of black fog surged out from behind him. "You're here to apologize? Very good. Then ask him which hand he used to hit her. Which hand did you cut off the tendons of his hand?" The foreigner on the other end of the phone was still arrogant at first. After all, the police in Wuxia couldn't do anything to him. He had a green card in his hand. In fact, this was indeed the case. If it wasn't a criminal case, foreigners would rarely be detained in Wuxia. Therefore, in less than 10 minutes, the foreigner was bailed out by his lawyer. He tugged at his suit, looked at the police with disdain, and walked out of the police station. What he didn't expect was that the whole situation changed the moment he walked out of the police station. First, the company asked him to go back to the headquarters immediately. Then he was scolded from the beginning to the end. His boss even grabbed his collar and asked him to apologize personally. "Where's your upbringing? Do you know that what you said on the plane was no different from what a bastard said?" At that time, The foreigner realized the seriousness of the whole matter. He was worried that he would lose his job, so he went to the place that his boss said with a gloomy face. It was a villa in the wealthy district. The whole villa was covered by roses, and it looked like an ancient castle. He originally thought that the other party would forgive him after he apologized. After all, they were business partners who didn't put benefits first. However, it was obvious that the foreigner had gotten the situation wrong again, because His Highness was never short of money. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.